above my parts me, let's drop gifts so we can push the live to the FYP together. That'll be much appreciated. Ablade Lead. Your surname reminds me of my classmate's surname. But I'm glad you're here. Thank you very much for being here. All right, so if you're on YouTube, thank you very much for being here. Please like the live and also share. Also, if you're on Facebook, kindly like and share as well. For folks on YouTube, please subscribe, and if you're on Facebook, kindly follow the account so you can, be notified whenever we go live. For those of us on TikTok, please follow the account and also enjoy all the beautiful things we have on our page. Having said that, I'm just gonna read description. So here's the thing. The video is a bit long, so I've broken it into two, and each has a different title and different articles, written about them. So I may, stop after the first part has finished playing to read the description of the article for that second one, okay? We're just going to begin like we always do. We're going to read the article here, and then we get started. But hold on. Hello, Mr. Debayo Adekola on YouTube. Thank you very much for joining us. And we have some great people here on TikTok as well. Abuladili Day, Mr. Larawaju, Koboko, Great Ami, and Mr. Abuladili. Okay, you're the same person. Thank you. And Toka, good evening. Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for being here. All right, Ẹkáàbọ dear. So we're going to be listening to a replay. This is something we're doing because of a video that somebody sent to me a while back. And so we decided to have a reaction video to speak to the matter being discussed in that other video. So apparently, this young lady thinks that somehow Nigeria owes people from the southeast, and it's important for me to repeat this thing. I mean, for the umpteenth time, these conversations we're not having these conversations because there is hate for any group or all of those nonsense that people bandy all over the place. It's just that you can't allow a certain narrative to fly, especially when you know that it is false. One of the problems we have generally, as far as Nigerian history is concerned, is that there's a single narrative, and that narrative, unlike what happens everywhere in the world, is the narrative of the victim. So I'm sure you must have heard people say that it's the victor that tells the story, right? So when you go to fight or you go to war, the victor wins, and so is able to write the story essentially. So you're seeing things through his perspective. Like that's what the world believes. For the most part, I mean, we even have a saying, the victor does a story. You say something like, until the lion shaking the entire story will be what people will believe. The idea basically is that the one who wins is the one who determines the narrative, but that's not what happens in Nigeria. Just like every other thing, that some things are inverted in our dearly beloved country called Nigeria. Mr. Sholayeton, yes, we're just starting, and welcome. So here's the thing, right? It's not that in our own case, we have a narrative that is spearheaded by, or that is, being pushed by the winning side. What's the word now? The opposite is our reality in Nigeria. We have the losing side actually determining what the entire country believes. Now, I don't think the winning side should be the one just determining what everybody believes. Just to be clear, I'm not saying that there should be a single narrative and it should be based on what the victor has accomplished or based on the perspective of the victor. I'm not saying that that should be the only narrative that should be heard. However, I think it is ridiculous that in our own case as a nation, as a country, we have a situation where the person who loses is the one who is telling us how to view things. And so whatever they say, we tend to say, oh, it must be true because you are the underdog and you were conquered, or you had some hiccups, or you were the David in the story and the Goliath must be a bad person. It's not every story that has David and Goliath that turns out to have a good David and a bad Goliath. In some cases, the David is actually the recalcitrant one. Okay, so what we do with these conversations is not to go after any group, it's just to say that it is wrong for us to have to spend our lifetimes kowtowing to the losing side because we want to be seen as good people. Good people, great nation. That's absolute nonsense. If you want to be good, but it should not be because you're being blackmailed to do so by the group that lost. And that's why I kept saying that the idea of no victor, no vanquish is probably one of the most counterproductive policies ever put out in the Nigerian political landscape. It makes no sense, but I do not judge the person who spearheaded it because he did it from the benevolence of his heart and was trying to build a better nation. And it's a very good thing, all those nice stuff. He was trying to get us in a situation where nobody thinks that somebody is, gloating and all of those things. So his rationale is correct, but the reality is that that particular policy was a mistake. Now, again, like I always say, I don't judge General Gowon for that. I don't judge him, but I wish he hadn't, come up with that policy, because what it does is you now have a group that tend to take on the take on the cloak of victimhood, and so you have to always pander to them because you want to appear not to be the overbearing victor. But you're not calling yourself a victor because you don't want to call yourself. So you're not calling yourself a victor because you don't want the other person to seem like they were conquered. But you can't call them vanquished because you want to feel, or you want to act respectful towards them. It's a conundrum that he has put all of us, and it's something we have to begin to change. It's been 50 years already, but it's important. 56 actually, if you think about it, since 1970. All right. But even then, we can begin to re-engineer our minds, not to disrespect any group, not to look down anybody, but to get to the point where I don't have to cut myself to size just because I'm trying to make you feel comfortable. You are not worth that much. Nobody is worth that much. And this is me being nobody does that to anybody in the country apart from a particular city. It makes absolutely no sense. All right, you allow things because I repeat particular. Anyway, all of to say that there's a video that came out recently where a young lady was saying that Nigeria should be equals reparations and all kinds of interesting things. I think that the reason the person will be able to make that kind of video is because she knows that the generality of our people are ignorant and we don't know what happened. Not because we want to be ignorant, but because for some reasons, one or two reasons, whatever, we don't really know. So I feel, why not let's have this conversation and we can all learn together. And when time comes, you can come up, you can ask a question, and then I can also ask you questions so I can learn from you. Before we get into this, someone is asking a question on YouTube. This is Shola Yeton. I don't know if he's a man or a woman, but I'm glad you're here. I think he's a he. It says, Prof, but is it good to build a nation on lies? Of course not. Of course not. Now, here's the truth. There are certain things you cannot put out. There are some truths you cannot put out. That's why you have classified information. That's the truth. It's not all the things that even some of the things I read, and by the way, there's a gentleman, I don't know if he's listening to me right now, asked me for a particular page in a particular book. I did as if I did not get that information because there are some things I cannot share. Not because, I've shared some of them on the platform, but I can't share them in a certain way because of what can come out of such information. All right. So some things the generality of our people are not supposed to know. To be honest, as a leader, you can't just necessarily share it with the world. And then after a while, you share it with the world in order. It's also important that there's certain information you must share so that you don't raise, number one, entitled brats, right? And you also don't raise naive children. We Yoruba are very naive of Nigerian history. There's some people are entitled. And we always try to, as it's called now, find a way to pander to the entitled ones. That's nonsense. So yes, I believe that you can't put everything out, but at the same time, you have to put enough out to have an informed populace, right? And then, of course, you can then grow from there, okay? And then as people grow, they will learn more things, they'll discover more things. And I think that's how societies are built, right? But it can't be lies. It can't be lies. And I think for the most part, when you listen to narratives from the South, to be honest, it's just propaganda driven. it is what it is. Nobody's fighting anybody. I'm just putting all this out to make it very clear that the conversation is about intellectual engagement, not ethnic baiting or whatever. Having said that, I think it's fair for us to now read the article. Again, if you're on TikTok, please like the live and also share. And also subscribe as well if you're on YouTube. So if Kim also, yes, you can share. You can share on TikTok, Abby. You can like on TikTok. You can subscribe on TikTok as well. If you're on YouTube, please like and subscribe and share. If you're on Facebook, please like and share. All right. Let us get into this. So the title of this one is When Nigeria Refuses to be Blackmailed, the Multi-Million Pound Post-War Receipts the Southeast Heights. The enduring narrative surrounding the Nigerian Civil War is facing a shattering, long overdue reality check as primary archival documentation completely disrupts decades of political storytelling. For generations, the rest of Nigeria has had to endure a highly coordinated campaign of Biafra propaganda that has successfully weaponized a heavily slanted history of victimhood. This carefully constructed narrative of perpetual grievance completely collapses when confronted with verified financial records and historical facts. While mainstream internet timelines are filled with endless sub-stories, the hard facts prove that Nigeria owes no single ethnic group any special historical reparations. The rest of the country has started comparing notes, checking the records of authors and eyewitnesses from all sides, and the elaborate pack of lies is falling flat. A young Igbo lady recently took to social media to complain that Nigerians are too quick to tell people from her region to move on from the war. That claim is patently untrue. Most Nigerians are historically predisposed not only to be sympathetic, but deeply empathetic to the plight of the defeated faction, making them easy targets for emotional manipulation. If people are finally beginning to say get over it today, it is because the victim narrative has completely overstayed its welcome. The country has developed total boredom with this permanent marketing of grievances, and the public is simply refusing to buy what is being sold. One of the most generalized falsehoods passed down through generations is the claim that Nigeria expected an entire population to rebuild their lives on a flat payment of £20, regardless of the actual bank balances. This narrative has been treated like a sacred family genealogy, but it remains a monumental fabrication. That £20 was not a debt owed by the federal government. It was an ex gratia payment, a completely voluntary gift given to help individuals restore their lives and get back on their feet. In 1970, £20 equaled 2 months' salary for an average laborer. By comparison, after the American Civil War, the United States government did not grant the defeated Confederates a single cent. It is deeply revealing that those who were shown such unprecedented post-war generosity have never shown a single shred of gratitude, choosing instead to complain that the gift should have been larger. Furthermore, the claim that every single individual was locked into that flat £20 payment, regardless of prior savings, is completely false. Citizens who possessed verified proof of their savings received their money back in full. A prime historical example is the father of John Nwodo, the former President General of Ohanaeze Ndigbo. Following the cessation of hostilities, Barclays Bank actively contacted his father to inform him that his account held over £6,000 plus accumulated interest. Many such families recover their assets completely. The flat £20 policy assistance was explicitly reserved for individuals who could not prove their savings or those who had exchanged the Nigerian currency for the completely worthless currency printed by the secessionist leadership, that's Biafran pounds. The Federal Republic of Nigeria went to extraordinary lengths to ensure the economic resuscitation of the region. Under the financial leadership of Chief Blackmailed, who serves as the Federal Commissioner of Finance, £3.5 million was directly deposited into Nnamdi Azikiwe's African Continental Bank and the Cooperative Bank of Eastern Nigeria. This massive injection of capital was specifically designed to grant local Igbo traders easy access to business loans to restart their commercial enterprises. Chief Blackmailed will also ensure that all federal statutory allocations that should have gone to the region during the war were saved and delivered in bulk to the administrator of the East Central State for immediate reconstruction, alongside a regular monthly subvention of £990,000. In addition to these structural funds, the federal government spent a massive 6 million naira directly on regional infrastructure and an additional 12 million naira specifically to rebuild the University of Nigeria, Nsukka. Individual citizens, state governments, and various religious organizations across Nigeria donated vast amounts of food, money, and volunteer services to help the population recover. The ultimate tragedy is that the children of those who benefited from this immense national solidarity now attempt to gaslight the rest of the country, acting as if the country owed their generations a permanent debt. The historical panic and modern bitterness surrounding post-war finance actually stem from a massive £30 million loss suffered by the secessionist leadership. In January 1968, Chief Blackmailed initiated a strategic currency redesign. This policy was completely necessitated by the actions of the secessionist forces, who had raided and looted £2 million from the Central Bank of Nigeria branch financial heists in Port Harcourt and Calabar. The currency change was a masterstroke designed to render that stolen federal loot completely useless on the international arms market. The secessionist leader, Ojukwu, attempted to salvage his hoard by sending agents to financial districts across the globe, but the operation failed, wiping out £30 million of his war chest. Interestingly, when Ojukwu fled the country at the end of the war, he did not pack the worthless Biafran pounds that he forced his people to use. He fled with foreign currency and valid Nigerian pounds. The reality remains that Igbos are citizens of Nigeria, and they possess equal rights like every other ethnic group across the country, and nothing more. The idea that any group can permanently blackmail the nation using wartime propaganda and falsehoods must be permanently put to rest. The secessionist forces wreaked immense havoc across Nigeria, maiming citizens, executing cross-border invasions, and bombing critical infrastructure well before the war even officially started. They have never been called to justice for these actions. Those who chose the path of peace, unity, and national healing are not fools. They simply choose to move away from unfruitful endeavors, which unfortunately seem to be the preferred vocation of agitators from the Southeast. Moving on and healing helps the individual far more than nursing historical wounds, and those who choose to perpetually broadcast a narrative of bitter victimhood must understand that the rest of the nation can choose to be unbothered by them as a weaponized empathy in order to protect the future of the country. Here's when Nigeria refuses to be blackmailed. Please enjoy. Let us get on with the topic. Let's get it on. Here is Governor Charles Soludo. Please take a listen.
Students can do something. Academics can do something. Intellectualism without action, without activism is sterile. Curiosity and critical thinking and questioning the status quo as major elements of intellectualism. This is what it is about. The university that I know used to start from doubt, questioning everything before getting to be convinced, isn't it? We debate and debate and not to accept it as it is. And here I will challenge you in a few ways. Part of my casual observation, however, is that our universities, not exclusively this one, and academics have significantly lowered the bar in terms of rigorous critical thinking and intellectual discourse, without which the university loses much of its salt. The hunger for knowledge and intellectual curiosity is alarming at a low. So 2 issues, or 3 issues I will raise with you, just to challenge you, just to say this curiosity, even what is said, there must be a bit of it, and I will share a few things where perhaps there might be opposition matters scenarios. One issue is state creation. Another is Igbo marginalization. Another is Biafra agitation. Let me take the Biafra question first. For about 27 years, the Biafra question resurrected and hovered over Igbo political consciousness like an unexorcised ghost. It has inspired armed insurgency, sustained diaspora grievance, and cost this region incalculable lives and economic opportunities. The sit-at-home phenomenon has gripped the Southeast from 2021, that gripped us through 2021, destroyed businesses, closed schools, and imposed a massive tax on production. By several estimates, the Southeast lost hundreds of billions of naira in those years of internal conflict. This loss is not government revenue. It's the fact that that bricklayer who ought to go, who goes to a daily toy, that woman selling akara to feed her children, these people who work out for them to feed, you debar them one day every week. People who used to come from all other parts of the world to come to shop in the Southeast had to boycott, and businesses started relocating elsewhere. We had human capital fled, infrastructure deteriorated, and investment dried up. But now I want to pose this question to this assembly of professors. Is there any history, economics, public policy, or international relations that has rigorously, scientifically, and dispassionately examined the rationality or irrationality of Biafran secession as a political economic project? Not as propaganda, not as sentiment, not as agitation or reflective rejection, but as a genuine intellectual question subjected to the full weight of academic rigor. But this debate needs to happen, not in a jungle, not in encrypted online channels, not in inflammatory social media posts that generate heat but produce no light. The debate should happen in lecture halls like here, at symposia, with methodology and peer review and the full arsenal of the academic enterprise. If the argument for separation is sound, let it withstand scholarly scrutiny. If it is not, as I deeply believe it is not, let that also be demonstrated not by coercion, but by the superior force of better reason. I'm looking forward to that debate. If this debate has not happened, and UNN of all places has not championed it, it is in itself an intellectual scandal. Recall, many of us must recall, that the Biafra War was literally declared in this very auditorium. But for this to be going on now for decades at this same auditorium has not made it a subject matter of inquiry or debate in rigorous inquiry. It's a little bit scandalous. It is a scandal for which the professorate must answer. When serious scholars vacate the space, it is not left empty. It is occupied by propagandists, by conspiracy voices, and by shallow populism. And propagandists, as history teaches us repeatedly, are very good at feeding value. Let me be direct. You cannot be pretending to discuss the future of Igbo in Nigeria or mainstreaming their position in a federal Nigeria without clarity on where you stand vis-a-vis separatist Biafra agitation. You can't have both. You can't have your two legs, one man. You are here, you are here. No, you will not move. I have stated my position too many times. I am a pan-Nigerian, pan-Africanist, and believe that Igbos are best served in a united and fairer Nigeria. That's my own belief, and I am prepared to engage when that debate comes up for us to argue. Let both sides present the argument. But the intellectuals must lead the way. Can't shy away. The Monday sit at home, you hide under the bed. We win your arrows, so money after the year, we are to fear that everybody for the
That was the governor of Anambra State, Governor Chukwuma Soludo. Fantastic speech, brilliant ideas, right? But there's an assumption in that speech. And the assumption is that intellectuals have been completely quiet. And I beg to differ. I think the intellectuals have spoken, but I think they have done what he wasn't expecting them to do, which is engage in propaganda. In other words, what he is saying is that subject this idea to intellectual rigor, right? Debate it, talk about its pros and cons, talk about the entire thing, shred it open, shred it apart, discuss it, understand what happened, right? Then you're able to hopefully draw the lessons. You have the peer-reviewed. In a peer-reviewed environment, you're able to actually go deep into stuff, right? Without having to think about emotions. And I want to read something, something that's very, very striking in what he said. He said, is there any single university in Nigeria, any single department that has rigorously, scientifically, and passionately examined the rationality and irrationality of Biafra secession as a political economic project? Not as propaganda, not as agitation, but as a genuine intellectual question subjected to the full weight of academic rigor. That speech and that expectation is correct, is right. That's how you have conversations that actually bring out the lessons from your past. That's how you raise a new generation that doesn't repeat the mistakes of the past, and they're able to build something better than their parents, which is why I like to talk about Yoruba history. And even in talking about Yoruba history, as great as we are as a people, there are things that have happened in the past that are also cool. And we talk about those things. And the beautiful thing about it is that you can have that conversation, not to spite the elders, not to spite our forebears, but to be able to learn the lessons. It's the same thing with Biafra. It's the same thing with Nigerian Civil War. But rather than folks use that Civil War as a tool to learn whatever it is that they shouldn't do, they have decided to weaponize stuff based on what he was talking about, propaganda. If there was anything that was allowed to, reproduce itself, so to speak, in the war efforts, it's actually propaganda more than anything else. As a matter of fact, I dare to say that a lot of people who are angry today and who lash out and who say things about the war and say how terrible Nigerians and how every other person is bad but their own fathers, the reason is not even because of what happened. It's because of the propaganda that they've heard. Therefore, that is what is sustaining the agitation. In other words, without the propaganda and the single narrative and the victim narrative and the lies, there's nothing to agitate. And to attack that is to come against their faith, their belief system. Because some people have built their entire life around that structure of victimhood. But I play that just to give you an idea that what I'm about to say is not new. Of course, the only thing is I have to read a lot of books to be able to get the information, but it's not like I'm creating anything. There are professors who have questioned these things, who have written about it, and the work really. And this is the interesting thing about Nigeria's history. It's not that there are no books. I hear people say things a lot. Nigerian people don't know Nigerian history. They don't write the books. We don't even know what happened. It's because there are books. Let me not say it's because many people are not reading. There are books. There are many books. Some you find truth, some you find a mixture of truth and lies, some you find absolute just lies. And one of the major intellectuals who have arisen out of the Southeast is Chinua Achebe. And when you read his memoir or his last book, There Was a Country, and you read a bit about Biafran War, you'll be asking the question, is it doing what Governor Charles Soludo is asking for, or is he doing exactly what he's speaking against? And I'll tell you this, he's doing exactly what Chukwuma Soludo is speaking against. Propaganda. And it's not surprising considering that he, Achebe, was a propagandist for Biafra. Himself, Uchechukwu Merije, Okokon Ndem, these people worked in Radio Biafra. And if you read Nelson Ota's book, I read it here before, the weaponization of the media during the war and the fallout of it is actually what I think people are actually suffering from today more than what happened. And I'm not saying that people did not suffer, to be clear. People suffered. Terrible things happened, right? People starved. People died. However, it wasn't just one-sided. It happened on both sides. But regardless of the size that it happened, the effects are real. Okay. However, the narratives have lasted longer than the events of the past. In other words, the memories of the events are not as even active as the narratives around those events. So the narratives have lasted much longer than the memories of the event. I want to read something to you from Nelson Ota before we listen to the young lady in question. I'm going this way because I don't want you to look as if she will say something and I'll begin to speak and I'll be like, why? Let's try and set a background for what we're about to get into. Ota released a book titled The Trial of Biafra's Leaders. And I'd like to read something from there just to give people an idea, about how we got where we are. It says here, Ojukwu and his aides, still very much ensconced in the comparative safety and comfort of the State House, Enugu, were determined not to listen to or cooperate with the field commander. Millions of the inmates of Ojukwu's monolithic empire fed on nothing but the fanfaronade being dished out by Radio Biafra, and so still convinced that no force in Black Africa could bring the Biafran empire down, were not listening either. So he said millions of the inmates of Ojukwu's monolithic empire, he sees the people as inmates, almost like prisoners. Monolithic empire essentially is about Igbo, the ethnicity, and the narrative. And they fed on nothing but the fanfaronade being dished out by Radio Biafra, and they were still convinced that no force in Black Africa could bring the Biafran empire down, and so they were not listening to anybody. Stay with me. The euphoria was too massive to allow either doubt or dissent. Lieutenant Colonel Banjo, the pessimist and coward, could go on clocking all over the place like a fussy hen. Enugu was still under this propaganda-induced mass hypnosis. When the troops of the 2nd Division of the Federal Nigerian Army recaptured Benin from the secessionist troops on 20th September 1967, Lieutenant Colonel Banjo had, even before the fall of the ancient city, removed his headquarters to Agbo. Things were no better for Ojukwu on the Nsukka front. It was in the same month of September that Major T.Y. Danjuma had issued to his troops an order of battle that read, "Mission to capture Enugu by 1800 hours on D7. When the 1800 hours struck, Major Danjuma and his troops started to advance rapidly towards Enugu. This was in the morning of 12 September 1967. Major Danjuma's advance brought him and his troops to such towns between Nsukka and Enugu as Akwebe, in which a young Nigerian intellectual, Major Christopher Okigbo, was killed after his battalion headquarters had been outflanked, Ikolo, Ogbede, Umulengbe, and Okpatu. At this time, Radio Biafra, please pay attention to what I'm about to read. At this time, Radio Biafra was still busy announcing the recapture of Nsukka and Okwe. Nigerian forces don't enter, collect Nsukka from them, conquer Okwe. The advance come Enugu, don't enter Enugu, but Radio Biafra, they tell the people, say they don't recapture the place that don't lose since. So he says, so they had what was the word now? They had captured towns such as Nsukka, Enugu, Akwebe, Ikolo, Ogbede, Nsukka, Enugu, Akwebe, Ikolo, Ogbede, Umulungbe, and Okpatu. At this time, Radio Biafra was still busy announcing the recapture of Nsukka and Okwe. That mindset of propaganda, that's what I want to actually establish before we listen to the girl. This game of mass deception continued until the advancing federal troops, probably angered by the blatant lie-telling of the Enugu radio station, lumped over 2 artillery shells which fell within a few yards of the broadcasting studio and set the broadcasters running. This incident took place in the morning of 26 September 1967. Within Enugu itself, events were marching furiously, although the mass hypnosis, which was at the time very effective, was still obscuring realities. Men and women in the streets were still telling themselves that they were still telling themselves and their neighbors that there was no danger, that the artillery shells, which were then exploding with uncomfortable frequency, were new weapon systems being tested by Biafran scientists. If you are a young Igbo person today, and your grandfather or great-grandfather, I don't know, because a lot of people are very young. I just discovered myself. I didn't know, but I discovered people are very young. You have people who are talking to you. Listen, age has nothing to do with this, to be clear. Like, information doesn't care. If you have information, that's okay. But you cannot be 20, 19, 21, who hasn't read a thing in your life, apart from nursery rhymes. You are telling Nigeria's history based on what your grandfather told you alone. Your grandfather is a resource, but alone, how will I listen to you now? Imagine your grandfather now tells you, your great-grandfather, whoever in your family, tells you that, Biafran scientists were testing their weapons in Enugu on September 21, 1967, or September 26, 1967, and they were just making all that noise because the Biafran scientists were really testing stuff. I'm supposed to believe that because your grandfather said that. But in reality, your grandfather believed that because Radio Biafra had told them that they had Biafran scientists testing stuff. Meanwhile, it was actually Nigerian forces forcing them out of their broadcasting stations where they were lying to your fathers and your grandfathers. So the rest of Nigeria should believe what your grandfather said rather than the reality of what really happened. You get what I'm saying? So what Otta calls mass hypnosis, called it induced mass hypnosis, such that people could be dying and they'll be telling you why they're dying, but the reason is different from why they're dying. E.g., when you talk about the starvation, which was a very terrible thing, by the way, a lot of people will die on the hill that Nigeria was responsible for the starvation. Was there starvation? Yes. Did people die of hunger? Yes. Was it good? There's nothing to celebrate about that. It's a terrible thing. The question, who was responsible? That's a question. Who would you hold responsible for that? And the answer, you will find it not in the Nigerian, you'll find it in Robert Goldstein's letter, August 1968. It was published in Morning Post, Lagos. I'm closing my eyes. I'm picturing the letter. You'll find it in the book by Gojalabi Sama, The Tragedy of Victory. And in that letter, he talked about how Ojukwu was not even allowing food to enter the East. It's a long story. We've done videos on it, so you can check out our videos on YouTube. Look for how Ojukwu, has to be something about how Ojukwu did not allow his people to eat, something like that, or how Ojukwu starved his people, something like that. The letter was a profound discovery for me, because I was like, how on earth would you be the leader of a people and you would starve them intentionally? Goldstein was the PR, was the public relations representative, right, of Biafra in the United States. He had gone to help, canvass for food and stuff, and then was saying, this was his words, the food, milk, and medicine were available, right? They just want Ojukwu to allow these things to enter. But what Ojukwu was doing was taking pictures of dying people and using that picture as propaganda in international newspapers, and he succeeded. So that today in 2026, when you see that picture, by the way, if you see that picture and you don't feel bad, something is wrong with you. Because if you just like, and so what, that means that you have a problem. Let's be telling ourselves the truth. There's no way you see that picture if you have blood coursing through your veins that you will not feel pity, sympathy for the people going through that. It was a terrible situation, but a man was taking the picture and using it for propaganda purposes. Now, am I the one making this up? No. And there are many sources. I just gave you one. Now, if a person comes around and says, see what Nigerians did to our people, and I say, well, I understand what your grandparents went through, or your parents, I understand what they went through, was terrible, but hey, this is what happened, and I break it down. And like, you hate us, you're a bigot, you're a tribalist. You are not thinking. Because in your mind, we have to forget what really happened and go by what Radio Biafra has taught you. Excuse me, and that should be our history. No, it can't be our history. We're not that dumb. We're not even dumb to begin with. Another example, there's a man called Okonkwo Ndem who used Radio Biafra to tell everybody in Igbo land, right, that the food that the Nigerian government was sending to Igbo land was poisoned. He said it was poisoned. There are young Biafrans who still believe that thing till today. Sorry, young Igbos. I don't know whether they're Biafrans. I don't even know where to put people, because, and that's what Governor Soludo was saying. You have one leg in Nigeria, one leg in Biafra. You want presidency, but you want your own nation. We don't know where you are. So whichever one we call you, it is well. Some people still believe that Nigerians were poisoning them. What they do not know is that if you read Chief Awolowo's interview, 1983 presidential campaign in Abeokuta, and I'm going to read part of it today. What actually happened was that, number one, Nigeria was sending food that they should not have sent. And listen, I say it boldly. When you are fighting a war, your enemy doesn't owe you nada. Let's be realistic. You want to fight a war, you should have used your brain to think of the food. Ojukwu granted an interview in 1970. It was September 1970. It was to Frederick Forsyth, where he said that he did not even plan for the food before the war. He said it. I just want to move a lot from the topic today, because I want to respond to a particular video. I'm just trying to set a stage. He said he didn't really plan for what they're going to eat. How is that my own fault as a Yoruba man, as a Nigerian? Why should I think I bear a burden? Why should I bear that responsibility as a Nigerian for the mistakes of Ojukwu, when Ojukwu himself said that he did not plan for your feeding or your parents' feeding? So number one, Nigeria did not owe the Southeast food. In fact, they could tell the people not to send food. Why? Because they are not responsible for that region that's been cut off. It's a war. War is not good though. May we not have wars in this country. As people on social media are saying that they want to fight war, there must be a war. It's not PlayStation, no. And most of these clowns, ordinary GT, what's that game they play? They're always losing. They can't even shoot gun in PlayStation. You think they will not have wars. But here's the thing: despite the fact that Nigeria did not owe the Southeast, the food was still allowed to get into the south, so into the Igbo heartland, into the eastern region. But what most people did not, know, and Awolowo discovered this when he eventually went to Port Harcourt during the war, was that the food that they were sending was being hijacked by Biafran soldiers, and the food was diverted to feed soldiers, lecturers, pharmacists, Radio Biafra people, including the person who was saying that the food was poisoned. That's why, and Awo was correct to say this. Awo said this, by the way. He said that's why you notice that when it was time for them, when they traveled to Lagos to surrender, none of them looked like they had kwashoko, because they were feeding. If you were useful to Ojukwu, he fed you. So they feed a particular class of people. Fed a particular class of people with the food coming in from Nigeria, and then told the rest of the people to feed on the lies that the food that was sent was poisoned. And the person telling you literally ate that food. He ate that food in the morning before telling you that the food was poisoned. But you want me to believe the propaganda, even though the person who is talking to you, I know he ate in the morning, and the food he ate is the same food that was sent. Meanwhile, the whole issue of kwashoko and why there was no food is even another topic entirely. The South has always had issues with food. And that's not a jab, just historically factual. They've always had issues with food, particularly protein-rich food. No meat, no fish, because for the fish, they had to go to rivers area. For the meat, they had to go to northern part of the eastern region. That's towards Obudu. With the war, those parts were cut off. Therefore, there was no protein. If you want to know more about that, read the book The Nigerian Civil War by John de St. John. Having said all this long to Renchi, let's listen to the video we want to respond to now. I think we've said enough so that when I begin to respond, you'll not say it's a bit harsh. I may be a bit harsh though, but I'll try not to. Let's take a listen to the young lady whose video was sent to me and is the reason for this conversation. Take a listen, please.
You know how every time an Igbo person brings up the Civil War or Biafran War, Somebody who is not Igbo will say, oh, why are you still talking about that? That happened so long ago. Haven't you moved on? Nigeria has moved on.
I've never heard that thing said. I think most Nigerians have been hoodwinked and blackmailed by the Biafran story. They rarely say move on. Maybe you are talking to yourself because you're wondering, like, we should have moved on. Why have we not moved on? So you're trying to now put other people in that category. For the most part, when Nigerians hear about the Civil War, they're usually very calm. They don't just say move on. It's not the attitude of most Nigerians, because a lot of them are predisposed to feeling sorry, to being empathetic, beyond even feeling sorry, beyond sympathy, to putting themselves in your shoes. So for the most part, I don't usually hear, and maybe they should be saying that more for now, because you are calling for it and it's important. I don't usually hear that. They don't usually say, oh, Nigeria has moved on, you move on. They don't usually say, because we'll talk about what Nigeria did to help these people. If they tell you to move on, they have a point. But for the most part, they don't even say, Nigerians don't usually say move on. They're usually like, hey, yeah. And that, hey, yeah, gonna serve is the reason you have been just moving anyhow. People have just been looking at you. But that stops now. Let's continue.
Well, I'm here to answer the question properly today as to why we haven't moved on. So the Biafran War, or genocide, if we're being honest, and
it was not a genocide. You know what? Let me play a bit, because if I stop every time, we won't live here. And I'll explain why I said it was not a genocide. It was a war. Let's continue.
15th January 1970. And when the war ended, General Gowon came and said, no victor, no vanquish. It is time for reconstruction, rehabilitation, and reintegration. The Igbos are our brothers, so let them come home. We were given £20, irrespective of how rich you were before the war or the number of properties you owned. It did not matter. You got £20. In 1952, 7 years after.
So she made a number of claims. Again, the plan of the objective of some of these videos is to actually appeal to pity. That's what it's all about. Appeal to pity. But it's not going to work. What's a genocide? What is genocide? According to the United Nations Genocide Convention, genocide refers to certain acts committed with the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. Was that what Biafra was? No. Biafra, that's war. It was a war, and it was, again, I speak like this not as somebody who is flippant or who doesn't care that people suffered. It was a terrible thing. But we've got to be very careful with definitions. That's how Ojukwu said there was a pogrom in 66. It wasn't a pogrom. It was a massacre, and it was terrible. But it wasn't a pogrom. Words have meanings. In the Southeast, every word means something different. For instance, marginalization means something. Marginalization in the Southeast, actually in Igbo mindset, it is when you don't allow them to dominate, you are marginalizing them. Words have meanings. Genocide, when you say genocide, it wasn't like they came with the intent to destroy Igbo people. That was not what it was. It was that you were trying to cut off a part of Nigeria beyond your own homeland. And to be clear, Biafra was an Igbo project that was basically about expansionism. You're taking people's lands and resources and trying to create a nation against their own will, killing them in their land, which we're going to talk about today. I hope we have the time. Killing them in their own land, whether it was in Rivers or in Cross River or in Akwa Ibom or in present-day Bayelsa or in Edo State or in Delta State or in Kogi State, in Benue State, in Lagos State, in Ondo State, killing people. And they say, oh, see, that's not a genocide. That's a war. That's war. It wasn't like they were like, okay, we're going to go to what do we do? These people in this particular part of the country, we're going to go there and destroy them. That's not what it was. It's not a genocide. You can use all the words and try to, get that emotional response, but this is the emotional response you're getting, the truth. That's the first part. Did people die? Yes. Was it good? No. Did Nigerians also die? Yes. Was there genocide against Edo people when they were killing them, or against Yoruba people when they were killing them? I think people don't talk about what young people need to know what happened. I like have a holistic understanding of what happened. So I don't say we have not moved on. If you like, don't move on. You can spend the next 1,000 years not being healed. That's your business. But to now manipulate the rest of the country into just see what you did to me, it's not going to. And you will see where she's going with this, by the way. That's when you understand why I'm very angry, because I'm actually angry now. But of course, we don't push everything out at the same time, because we have to do everything respectfully, right? You will see where she's going with all this. But here's the thing: you can't use words, right, and act as though words have no meanings. That's first thing. Number two, people died. It was a terrible thing. It was a war. It wasn't a genocide. Number three, 20 pounds. She said Igbos got 20 pounds no matter what they saved. That's not true. Let's begin by saying that the 20 pounds Igbo got after the war was not a debt that Nigeria owed them. Okay? Nigeria did not owe Igbo people. It wasn't like they did something for Nigerian government and like, how do we pay them back? Or remove everything they had, just give them 20 pounds. That's not what happened. In actual fact, what happened was the magnanimity of people like Awolowo and Gowon to Igbo people. There was a war in the United States of America. There was a civil war. The Confederates did not get 1 cent after they lost. Which is why when she said, Gowon said, no victor, no vanquish, I said earlier, one thing, I mean, there are two things I don't like that Gowon did. And like I said, I don't judge him over those things, but I understand he was young, but it's something that people should never make. That is a mistake we should never make again. You can't say no victor, no vanquished. It's an emotional statement that really has no substance. Especially when you're dealing with a people at a particular level of evolution as a culture, as a society, where things are easily weaponized. Even before that period, they've been weaponizing stuff since the 1940s. It was so bad that by January 47, Arthur Richards, the Governor General of Nigeria, was saying that these people are always clamoring for more and more of everything, but they contribute the least in the country. Knowing what you know, you can't say no victor, no vanquish. Of course there was a victor, of course there was a vanquished, of course Nigeria won, of course Igbos lost. It wasn't this Eastern region that lost. You'll be joking if you think that the Eastern region lost that war. The Eastern region did not fight that war. Were there people from other parts of the East that were not Igbos in the army? Yes. Ask the question, what happened to their own people in that region? They were killed. The Eastern region did not lost. The Igbos lost because it was an Igbo war. That's why when you hear people that are always shouting about Biafra, it's Igbos. For whatever reason. I think for obvious reasons, to be honest. Here's the thing. There's a victor, Nigeria. There's a vanquished, the Igbos. And it should have been better for them to be told that in 1970 than for you to say no victor, no vanquished. Because like I said earlier, when you say no victor, no vanquished, you create a vacuum. The person who lost knows that he's not the victor. He can't claim to be victor. He knows that he lost. He doesn't want to say he's vanquished because he has ego, which is natural. He doesn't want to say, because of course, he can't say that because he didn't pronounce it. So why should he say it to himself or use it to describe himself? Therefore, a vacuum exists, which has to be filled because nature abhors a vacuum. So what does it do? It weaponizes the situation by creating villains and victims. It makes the victors the villains and makes the vanquished the victims. And so in the story, the villain, the vanquished is a perpetual victim in every narrative that has to do with Nigeria. And the victors are seen as villains, like they are terrible people. E.g., see what's happening with the book that Gowon launched a couple of days ago. Look at the comment section across social media. Who are the people cursing him out? Igbos. Meanwhile, if they knew what he did to help their parents and grandparents, I don't even think they will still be grateful, Sha. But himself and Awo, those two that they really hate and curse out every time, actually did more for them and their parents and their grandparents than Ojukwu ever did. That is a fact. And I'll get to it today. I hope I finish on time, but whenever we finish, wherever we stop, we'll continue some other time, but I will read it today. What Gowon and between Gowon and Awolowo, there's a reason Ukpabi Asika was able to achieve all the things he did achieve as the administrator of East Central State. It was because of the support of those people. Nobody talks about that. Just be crying we are victims. But why can they say they are victims? Because you did not say they were vanquished. So at the end of the day, it comes back to the leaders. It's about the leadership. You don't say things like, nobody really won or nobody really lost or we're all brothers. No. Okay, you lost. He won. Everything I'm doing for you from that point forward is based on benevolence. I don't owe you Jack. Turns out Jack is Jacobo Gowon as well. But you get the point. The £20 was called an ex gratia payment. That's a big word for gift. And I need to play you a video of a man who eventually turns out to be, who became the Governor General of Juanes Ndigbo. So this is not a man, just a random person on the street. This is one of the people that led the apex sociocultural organization in Igbo land. He talked about how his father got £6,000 6 months after the war. But let me finish the statement about the ex gratia payment. You see, 3 things happened that led to the £20 policy. Again, £20 was based on the magnanimity of Nigeria. It was not a debt that was owed. Why am I saying this? Is it because I hate a group? No. It's because I love Yoruba people and I love Nigeria. One of the things that people have done to us, why do we have a lot of people joining obedient movement and just castigating their own people, insulting their own fathers in the name of politics? It's because they've been made to hate where they come from. They've been told that somehow they owe a certain part of Nigeria something. There are 3 things. Number 1, people took money and returned to the south, so they had their bank accounts. Number 2, some people actually withdrew their money and handed it over to Ojukwu and converted it to Biafran pounds. Now, number 3, some of the people that had money were able to, something happened, right? And it happened in 67. What happened was that Ojukwu sent his boys to Benin during the Midwest invasion. They looted Central Bank Benin and carted away £2 million. By the way, most of the things that people are saying is based on pain. It's pain. It's pain talking. Carted away £2 million. He also looted banks and post offices in Calabar and in Port Harcourt. Someone says robbed, not loot. Okay, maybe so. Took all that money and then was going to use the money to buy weapons for Nigeria. At this point, I think I should read. I'm thinking how much can we read because of time? Let me just tell you because of time. I'll tell you what happened. He took £2 million, right? And then stole money from other places. The idea was to use the money to buy weapons in order to fight the Nigerian government. Nigerian government, of course, caught wind of what happened. They knew that they had stolen the money. So what did they do? Awo came up with an idea, and he talked about it in his 1983 interview. It was like, we've got to change the design of the Naira. And they had a 19-day window for people to change that currency. And they did that because they were going to make the money that Ojukwu stole useless. All right? So what he did was, within the first couple of weeks in January of 1968, we wanted to quickly change the currency. Now, some Igbo people were able to change that currency. One of them, her name was Angeli Okori. Angelina Okori was a woman who was selling things to Nigeria, to Biafran forces, but she always had access to Nigeria. She would travel to Nigeria, buy stuff. So when the change happened, and you find our story in a CNN report, when the switch happened, she was able to change her money to the new currency. All right? Now, such people got their monies. But there's another group of people, they are taking their money and given to Ojukwu and received Biafran pounds instead. Now, those ones, after the war, decided to bring that money expecting that Nigeria would collect the worthless notes and give them Nigerian pounds. Now, that makes no sense because the money had no value. It wasn't even worth the paper on which it was printed. So how exactly would Nigeria collect worthless money and then give you Nigerian money? The other group was the group that did not change their money at the time. Those ones, there's no way you're going to bring fake old notes 2 years after and tell me to give you the value of today because I love you or that we are one Nigeria. They changed the currency January 1968. The war ended January 15, 1970. There is no way they will now say, oh, because you are a good person, we will now take the old notes that, because of course you always have a window. If you want to change, whether change currency or change design, it still happened during the last election. It's not something you just leave open forever because you're trying to protect your economy. The third group was the people who were able to actually find the proof that they had savings, whether it was passbooks and so on and so forth, that they were able to present as evidence that they still had money. One of them was John Nwodo's father. Right? I'd like you to take a listen to John Nwodo, who, like I said earlier, became the Governor General of Ohanaeze Ndigbo, and what he said about how his father got his money back after the war. Please take a listen.
For that £6,000 that was left in the money, my father discovered it 6 months after the war, when the manager of Barclays Bank then, which is now Union Bank, called him and revealed to him that he had £6,000 plus interest, which were not tampered with during the course of the war. My dad then decided to buy a Mercedes lorry bus. That time in the southeast, all the vehicles that were there had been used during the war and many had been cannibalized, and the few that survived were smoking or hardly in any good condition to traverse state territories. There was no farming throughout the war, and a lot of people who were compressed in few communities where the war did not reach did not have enough food cultivated in those communities to sustain them. So all the food that were coming to the east were brought from the west and the north, principally from the north. And so all the transporters had it. But that £6,000 that was left in the money, my father discovered it 6 months after the war, when the manager of Barclays Bank then, which is now Union Bank, called him and revealed to him that he had £6,000 plus interest, which were not tampered with during the course of the war.
The father left some money in the bank before the war, £6,000. And then 6 months after the war, the bank called his father and told him that, listen, you have money here. As a matter of fact, you even have interest. His father wasn't the only one. There were many who got their money back. Most of these people crying around. If I say what I want to say, it's just going to feel as if somebody doesn't have empathy. But the truth of the matter is that a lot of people got their monies back. If you could provide proof, in fact, in this particular case, it wasn't even the father, according to him, it wasn't even the father trying to talk to the bank to collect his money. It was the bank reaching out to him to tell him that he has money with them. And there are many examples of this, by the way. So what do you see here? You see 3 examples like I mentioned earlier. Number 1 were the group that gave their money to Ojukwu and collected their Biafran pounds. So here's the question I want to ask you. If you as a person, for whatever reason, decide, maybe for, I don't know, maybe patriotism or whatever reason, decide to give Ojukwu your money. Ojukwu then runs away to Cote d'Ivoire, leaving you empty-handed. Should you be looking for Ojukwu to give you your money back, or should you be looking to Nigeria to reimburse you? Like, we owe you nothing now. It wasn't like Nigeria owed Igbos or anything. Ojukwu was the one who collected that money. Ojukwu and Biafran force. By the way, they have this, the governor of Central Bank of Biafra, them, his first name was Sylvester. There's supposed to be two people in the committee. The other one was a professor who was fighting the war. He was the only one at home, was the governor, was the secretary. He said it in an interview. I just want to read tonight because of time. There was no basis for the currency. And when they stole the money, and like I always say, the primary problem was the fact that Awolowo spoiled the money that Ojukwu had stolen. By the time the government began to change the currency design, Ojukwu sent his people to every financial capital of the world. They were in New York, they were in London, carrying briefcases of naira, trying to sell to as many people as they could. On the date we were Pariton, they found 7 suitcases. If you read the book by John de St. John, 7 suitcases of Nigerian pounds they found in London airport. They found suitcases in New York. By the time the dust settled, Ojukwu had lost about 30 million pounds. That's actually waiting they paying people. Now the pain Ojukwu they transfer to these ones, we just talk nonsense. Ojukwu lost 30 million pounds because of that single policy. And I also said that Ojukwu himself said that that policy was actually the major policy that destroyed their chances. Why? Because yes, they had foreign reserves, but they had a lot of money in naira. And they had also stolen a lot of money from banks. And for you to change the design abruptly and give only 19-day window means that you essentially scuttled their plan, which was actually the real problem. So 30 million pounds was the reason for this wala. And in order to look good, and this is what Ojukwu did over and over again at different points in his career, during that Biafra saga, he would find a way to pin whatever it is on someone else in order to extricate himself. So, for instance, when the war turned against them, who did he blame? He blamed Ifeanyi and Victor Banjo, and he killed them. Read the trial of Biafra's leaders. Look at the Suntofi Victor Banjo Koloriko said makes no sense. But he has to find somebody else, like a scapegoat. There's always a scapegoat for him and his propagandist. And he's never responsible for anything. He's always the other people. Just like the clowns who are talking in the comment section, right now. And I see you, but I'm not going to respond to you just yet. Now, here's the question. Why did Nigeria give $20, 20 pounds? Again, it was a gift. I'm a Yoruba man. We were taught to be thankful, to be grateful to anybody who gave us something. In other words, we don't go around castigating a generous person. We're supposed to be grateful. These ones who have been crying about 20 pounds, it was a gift that you should be grateful for. It was not a debt that was owed to you. Now, let me read something to you. What's the value of 20 pounds in 1970? In Nigeria, it was essentially, so at the time, that's around 1970, a laborer, like laborer to share kini, menial jobs, okay, earned about 10 pounds a month. That's an unskilled government laborer, like it could be a driver, it could be working for the government. Gets 10 pounds, at most 14. What the government did was to give people 2 months, essentially the 2 month salary of a junior worker, a very junior worker, so that they're able to get back to their lives. They're able to get back wherever they came from, because they couldn't even stay in the southeast. That to go back. But was that everything Nigerian government gave the southeast? No. If you read the book, Go On, the biography of a soldier statesman by J. Samuel Ligo, he mentioned that 5 million naira was given to African Continental Bank. As a matter of fact, it was actually 2 banks. So when you read that, you have to put things together. When you read Awolowo's account, 3.5 million pounds, by the time we put everything together, was given to Azikiwe's bank, African Continental Bank. And another tranche was given to Cooperative Bank of Eastern Nigeria. Why did the federal government put money in those banks? Because they were the banks that Igbos were using. So in their minds, Igbos will be able to access loans to start their businesses. And did they get those loans? Yes. Do you hear about it in the streets? No. 20 pounds, 20 pounds, 20 pounds, 20 pounds. That's the only thing you hear. The federal government put money, and the Minister of Finance at the time was Awo. And by the way, for a Yoruba person, I say it 1,000 times, you have nothing to be ashamed of. You have no business acting like you owe anybody anything in this country. You owe nobody nothing but love and respect. Love everybody, respect everybody. God is good to all of us. We're one Nigeria, a great nation. But that I owe you something, to tell that no, I don't owe you jack. Awo did not owe anybody anything. You cannot use Awo to say Awo did something. Awo did the best that your fathers could not do. That's the truth. And I say that with all respect, if I can, I don't know. The point is, they put 3.5 million pounds in African Continental Bank. That's Azikiwe's own bank, because people will be able, so that people will be able to access loans and use that to start their businesses. So the 20 pounds was go back so that you can get back to wherever you were before the war, and then you can settle, because we can't just begin to give you money anyhow. The economy will tank now. We did not tell you to go and give the money to Ojukwu to collect Biafran pounds. We did not tell you not to be in Nigeria to change that currency where the currency design was changed in January of 68. You can't come 2 years later and say, okay, I had one. Think about it today. Can you go anywhere in Nigeria and say, okay, oh, I had 150 naira better life, give us polymer? They won't answer you now, because there was a particular period of it's monetary policy, isn't it? So there is no way on earth Nigeria is going to be paying that. If you want someone to hold responsible, that's Ojukwu. He collected your parents' money and then he jackpot. That is, go and talk to him. The Biafran pound that you're bringing back wasn't even you could not even buy you toilet paper. So how exactly would Nigeria collect that money and give you pounds? However, those who had money in banks and had proof were able to get their monies back, even if it was a billion pounds, if anything like that ever existed. And an example, we played an example earlier, talking about his own father, how he got £6,000 from Barclays Bank. That story also needs to be told. Now, which one did I say earlier? 3.5 million pounds, under 5 million naira. Money was given, at this point I have to open. I want to mention the exact figures. I think good. I opened it somewhere. Let me read something to you. 6 million naira was spent on the rehabilitation of industries. African Continental Bank got 5 million naira for its reopening. University of Nigeria, Nsukka, got 12 million naira for reconstruction. Does anybody say anything like this? No, just let's cry. We're not crying again. Let's tell ourselves the truth and let the devil be ashamed. Nsukka, UNN got 12 million naira for its reconstruction. ACB got 5 billion naira. By the time they put everything together, it was 3.5 million pounds. So it was even more than 5 million naira. CBEN, Cooperative Bank of Eastern Nigeria, also got money. The money that was supposed to go to the East Central states throughout the war, guess what Awo did with that money? He kept it. He saved it. When we listened to General Gowon earlier, he mentioned how they appointed Ukwabi Asika. That money, the bulk of that money, Awo took it together and gave it to Ukwabi Asika. Gave it to the administration of the Eastern region. Then every month, they were giving subvention of £990,000 on a monthly basis. And later, of course, the other states also wanted, so they also started getting subventions. But first of all, all the money that should have gotten that they should have gotten during the war, I'll put it together and give it to them. And they got £990,000 every month. This is apart from what state governments and individuals did in Nigeria. And I'll read some of those things. I don't want to read. I will just be telling you to Shenka and sing. So there was food. All right. There was food. There was resources. Sorry, there was food. There was medicine, clothes from different parts of Nigeria. A lot came from the Yoruba area. Churches, governments, and individuals. You find all of that in this book. Go on, the biography of a soldier statesman. Please power tap on TikTok. It wasn't just £20,000. Also, Gowon called for volunteers to help rebuild the Southeast. He called for doctors, nurses, engineers, technicians, builders, plumbers, mechanics, administrators, skilled hands. In a short time, 15 doctors and 50 nurses were rushed to the Igbo Heartland to embark on mercy operations alongside 900 Nigerian Red Cross officials and 114 foreign Red Cross officials. In addition, the federal government made available 2 million naira, that's 1 million Nigerian pounds then, for relief activities. There were 700,000, they were feeding 700,000 people daily in the eastern states. The Red Cross stockpiled 10,000 tons of food. Umbo, there's one I want to read. I hope I find it. Where people actually, okay, I found it. It says here, the Nigerian Red Cross Society performed admirably well. They fed, clothed, and provided medical care for the ordinary citizen. Their work, listen to this, their work was made a bit easier by the cooperation of individual Nigerians and state governments all over the country who donated food, cash, and other forms of aid towards providing relief for their brothers. Where I come from, when people do a good turn deserves another. When people do something like this, what do? You thank them. You say, no, ojo. Not that you be like, you could have done better. You could have done better. See what you did to me. I didn't owe you jack. Since you don't have sense to be thankful, let's tell you the truth. Nobody owed you nothing. There's something I want to play. I hope I find it. When people were returning, I want to play you two clips. I'm going to play you two clips of what happened in the Rivers area and what happened in Yoruba land in Lagos after the war and what our fathers said. Thinking back right now, I don't even think they did the right thing, to be honest. But again, I think they were being omoluabi. If you go and become omoluabi to an ingrate, you now be wondering, why did I even help you in the first place? If you're going to be, making look as if I owe you something or I owed you. Take a listen to this, please. This is after the war, Rivers area. This is the response of folks in Rivers area. Take a listen, please.
Asked some Rivers men what they thought of the Igbos.
It was, though we are all one Nigeria, but they misbehaved themselves, and we feel at the moment, at this time, they should remain in their East Central state.
You don't think there is a place for them to work down here now?
At the moment, I don't think so.
Do you think it will come in the future?
That future can tell.
But not now?
Not now.
Those are Rivers people talking about whether they wanted Igbos to return after the war. You see how welcoming they were, Abi? Okay. Listen to what your own fathers, your Bible, listen to what they said after the war. Take a listen.
Can you accept that the Igbos will be your brothers after this war?
Of course, really. We like them. They are still Nigerians. We want them. That's why we are fighting for unity.
Do you think they will like you so much, though, after all this?
But I can't say, but we know that we like them.
But do you feel it will be easy to integrate them in Nigeria now?
Well, they are already Nigerians. What? They are already Nigerians. We never disputed it.
Well, they disputed it, though, didn't they?
No, they didn't dispute.
Well,
they were misled.
But they set up a country of their own, called it Biafra.
They were misled, not that they did.
Oh, they were misled.
They were misled, and they've now seen the light.
Do you feel that the
Someone says on TikTok, we are too forgiving. That's a robodo. Greater Me says, these Rivers people saw them for who they were. I guess so. is the one who said, come back home, come back home. That's the one that, we have to find a way to even tell that they should have done more. The one who said, don't come, maybe that one even knows what he's talking about. We are just doing good people, great nation. I think we've answered that for now. So £20 was a gift, was not a debt, and it was not the only thing that was done for the Igbos. It was not the only thing. A lot was done, and I mentioned some of it. I mentioned the £3.5 million that went to African Continental Bank for Igbos to borrow money to start their businesses. I mentioned another amount that was given to Cooperative Bank of Eastern Nigeria so that they could get loans to start their businesses. They didn't start from the scratch like they always tell you. We got £20 million, we got £20, and everybody started over again. Number one, £20 was 2 months' salary of a junior worker to help you get back where you're coming from, and then you had access to loans to restart your lives. £12 million naira went to University of Nigeria, Nsukka, to rebuild the school. The entire money that was saved for 3 years, for 2.5 years, 30 months, from July all the way, was given to the administrator of the East Central State. £990,000 on a monthly basis that's about £1 million on a monthly basis given to that East Central State. So the idea that, and Ukwabi Asika that we're always mentioning, it was credited to rebuilding the Eastern region very fast. He did that because it was supported by the same government that you want us to criticize. Now, if you're a Nigerian, love everybody, respect everybody, but do not let anyone gaslight you into thinking that you owe them something. Because what I'm about to play right now will probably make you angry. But let's continue listening to the young lady. Take a listen, please.
In 1952, 7 years after the Holocaust, Germany signed the Luxembourg Agreement, where they agreed to pay the survivors of the Holocaust, the Jewish survivors, reparations. And so far, they have paid them about $90 billion. In 2023 alone, they paid $1.4 billion. Nobody's saying to them, oh, that was so long ago. Oh, why haven't you gotten over it? Germany is still paying till today. Rwanda. After the genocide in 1994, the Rwandan government built the Gakaka courts. So it was a national justice system where reconciliation happened. So the perpetrators confessed and survivors testified. And you could see like both sides coming together to do a true reconciliation. They tried about 1.9 million cases. South Africa. After apartheid, the government put together a Truth and Reconciliation Commission with the intention to reconcile. And this was headed by Desmond Tutu. Whatever happened during apartheid was going to be remembered. There was no amnesia happening. And they even put it in policy that they will not forget what had happened. Now, Nigeria tried to do something similar by having a Truth Commission. Do you remember the Oputa panel? What happened to the Oputa panel? What happened to the findings of the Oputa panel? They got buried. So when you tell Igbo people to move on from what exactly?
Nobody should tell people to move on. I don't even think you should ever move on. Don't move on. Don't, please don't. Just hit yourself and expect the other person to feel the pain. Don't move on. Here's the thing. I'm going to respond to two things she talked about. I need time. But here's the thing. Number one, I don't think anybody should say move on. It's your choice. You don't have to move on. However, there's something called healing. If you heal, it's for your good. If you don't heal, that's your problem. If you like, don't heal. But what you are not going to do is to twist history. Number one, there is no reparations coming to anybody. All this, how can you compare yourself with Holocaust? Why do you like pain? Why do you like victimhood? Why do you like suffering like this? Now, let's start with the last thing she said. She talked about Oputa panel, and it's true. Nigeria had Oputa panel, and the results, I mean, the report is actually available. Last week, I actually went through, oh boy, that thing is heavy. Lots of documents, like the report is there, but the government never really released it formally because, of course, IBB had gone to court saying that they should not be able to force him to be present at the Oputa panel. And the court, was on his side. But of course, somehow they used that to justify not revealing the stuff about Oputa panel. But let's be clear. Oputa panel was not about Igbo marginalization. As a matter of fact, the North had their own stuff. Folk from the South had their own stuff. And the things that came out, see, people should be careful what they are wishing for. Everything should be said, by the way. But when they say it, if you cry, during that Oputa panel, let me read to you what Igbo leaders said they wanted, and then I'll tell you what they said last year. But let's go back to Oputa panel first. I was just laughing. So everything to get to reparations, you cannot compare yourself to Jews. That was a Holocaust. The Jews were not trying to create a state within Germany. They were targeted. Nobody targeted you. The Jews did not come up with a coup in a country and then taunt the owners of the land, of their host communities, taunt them and say, see what we have done to you. For months, before those ones got really angry and retaliated in May. The Jews did not create a government in Germany and they fill the entire place with their own people. The Jews did not declare Biafra and try to annex other people's lands in present-day Cross River State, Akwa Ibom State, River State, and Bayelsa State. The Jews did not invade other people's territory like the Midwest. But you know what? Let me read to you what Johannes said they wanted during the Oputa panel. Against the background of the alleged violation of their rights, Ohaneze sought the following remedies from the federal government of Nigeria. Number one, compensation for the Igbos over the atrocities of the past. This one is a young lady saying exactly what their father said in 99. Their grandfather said it in 99. Their father said it last year. I'll tell you what they said last year. Just stay with me, please. So they said compensation for the Igbos over the atrocities of the past. Number two, reverse discriminatory allocation of industries. Number three, give the East a steel rolling mill. They always ask people to give them something. But it's okay. Give the East a steel rolling mill and petrochemical industry. Number four, give the East the second Niger bridge. Number five, dredge the Niger, Imo, and Oguta lakes. Number six, appoint 2 persons into the National Security Council. Number seven, appoint an Igbo man a divisional commander. Calculation of human losses during the Civil War. Number one, 50,000 Igbos killed in the north, which is a lie. By the way, when I say something like this, I'm not trying to say nobody died, but don't let people lie to you. I'll pause very quickly. 50,000 people did not die. As a matter of fact, this thing is a lie from Ojukwu, and Ojukwu said it in 1969, 3 years after the fact. So what really happened? Bell and Binio. Again, I always say this, when we talk about people dying, one death is one too many. Nobody should be dying anywhere. All right? So this is not to say, oh, it doesn't matter because it wasn't that many. Regardless of the number, nobody should be dying. 1 second, please. Nobody should die, regardless of the number. So I want to make that very clear. So it's not like, even if it's one person, that's one too many, let alone, thousands of people. However, this 50,000 figure is a lie from the pit of hell. So let me tell you what happened. And you find some of these things in 2 books, Nigerian Civil War by John Desenjo, Crisis and Conflict in Nigeria by H.M. Green. Let me tell you what John Desenjo said. He said, Ojukwu played an irresponsible numbers game. I'm quoting him verbatim. He said, Ojukwu played an irresponsible numbers game. How? There was crisis in the north, August, right? Following the killing of Inosi, July 29, 1966 in Ibadan. Things spread to the north, right? And originally it was the officers killing themselves, then later killing all civilians, and it was terrible. When that happened, people ran to the east. Ojukwu had not called them back at the time. They ran to the east. So when they got back, they told in the east. You find this in the books I mentioned earlier. They began to kill Northerners in the east. You find killings in Umaya, in Port Harcourt, in Owerri, in Oboloafo, in Onitsha. The ones they killed in Oboloafo, those, and they were not 2, 10, 20, 30, 40, 100, 200, 500, 600, 1,000 people. They killed, there was a train taking people to the north, had about 2,000 people in there. Biafran forces, Biafran soldiers, whoever they were, they went after that train. They stopped the train, got all the male adults who were Northerners in that train. They killed them and threw them into the Imo River. Let that sink in for a second. This is from the people that they caught on the streets, the homes that they raided, people that they killed in their houses. Thousands. Some foreigners were in Oboloafo. They were traveling towards Benue, and they saw what happened. Through them, the news got to Benin Republic, Radio Cotonou. Radio Cotonou broadcast the event in French, and they now caught the transmission in Kaduna. Kaduna then broadcast in English and Hausa. As soon as they heard it, they began to kill Igbo people. It was terrible. Whether what happened in the north or what happened in the east, terrible. It should never happen again. I mean, we never see it again. By September, October, Ojukwu's Eastern Region government released a pamphlet. The title of the pamphlet is what has been used since then to describe what happened in the north. The title was Pogrom. It wasn't a state-sanctioned thing. Again, words have meanings, but let's leave that for a second. In that document, Ojukwu Eastern Region released a document called the Pogrom. That was the last quarter of 1966. And in there, they stated that about 7,000, or between 7,000 and 8,000 Igbos were killed in the north. This was in October of 1966. 7,000 to 8,000 people were killed. 7,000 to 8,000 Igbo people were killed in the north. Again, the numbers don't count when you talk about life, but numbers count when you begin to count. When you begin to count it, so when you begin to tell us lies, we have to go for what really happened. 7,000 to 8,000 people is a lot, though. Make no mistakes. But that was in October, and it was over. By the way, it was over at the time. It was terrible. It had come and gone. They've been able to, settle everything. But Isha released that report, says between 7,000 to 8,000 people, 8,000 Igbo people died in the north. The pogrom was called Pogrom. January 4 and 5, they were in Aburi for the Aburi Accord. And in that place, thank you, Mr. Dungus. We have elders here. He says, I remember that. Mr. Dungus says, I remember that pamphlet, Pogrom. Thank you, sir. It's good to have elders. I read books, but they have experience. 1967, January 4 and 5, Ojukwu went to Aburi and said the people that died in the east were 10,000 people. Sorry, the Easterners that died in the north, the Igbos that died in the north were 10,000 Igbos. 10,000 people. They're like, okay, 7,000, 8,000, 10,000. Most likely you can round it up. Okay, and you won't feel any big deal, like 10,000 people there. That's really bad. May 30, 1967, Ojukwu released a statement and he said 30,000 people died last year. As though that wasn't enough, 1969 Ahira Declaration, Ojukwu said there were 50,000 people. The same event, not the same people, they die, they don't die finished, like it was terrible, it has ended. But the numbers were changing. We had 4 different numbers. The 7,000 to 8,000, it was 1, 10,000, 30,000, 50,000. And that's why when you read Frederick Forsyth's book, The Biafran Story, and the one by Achebe, There Was a Country, they used the 30,000 figures. In this Kini of Ohaneze, they used the 50,000 Ahira Declaration number. If a Nigerian let anybody gaslight you, you are the one, is your fault though. People died, and it's terrible. But stop hyping figures. That's why John the St. John said Ojukwu played an irresponsible numbers game. Just hyping the stuff so that people can feel, yeah. And pity is bad though. See, you want people to be empathetic and compassionate towards you. Don't weaponize it. Sorry guys, there's something here. You're going to get, yes, if you successfully get people to, pity you to the point where they allow you to do anything, you will feel like you have won in life. You have not. What you have done is that you have killed a part of you. You have successfully made yourself a second-class citizen without anybody calling you that. You are a perpetual victim because your life now depends on the sympathy of others. So yes, you are succeeding by, once you say, they will say, when it gets to a particular point, by the way, people get tired of it. If you have a child who is still crying if you have a child who cries to get breast milk, it's okay. Once your child gets like a toddler, you begin to say, Oga, shortly sorrow, why? Once you begin to speak, you begin to tell the child, isn't everything you cry about, you have to talk. Imagine your child, your teenager coming to you crying to collect car keys. You think will you give the child the car key? Calculation of human losses during the Civil War. Number one, 50,000 Igbos killed in the north. That's a lie. Number two, 10,000 Igbos killed in northern parts of Nigeria between 67 and 1970. I don't want to stop talking about it. I don't want to stop to talk about every number. So come on, and play. Number three, 30,000 Igbos maimed in the pogroms between 1960. There was no pogrom. There was a massacre, and it was terrible, and it should never have happened, but it was not a pogrom. Words have meanings. Number four, 50,000 severely raped women. Number five, 50,000 assaulted and maimed. Number six, 600,000 killed during the war. I will talk later. Number seven, 900,000 children who died. Number eight, 500,000 women raped. Is it different from the one that was severely raped? Okay. I spoke with an elder from the Southeast a couple of years ago. We're just talking about stuff. He's an able man, he's in his 80s. I have good men in my life from every ethnicity, including Igbos, so there's no hate, to be honest. It's just that Otoro, Mayas, Okusone, people hate the truth. Ayoko Oto. We're talking about something else, and he said, do you really know about what happened during the Civil War and the numbers of people that died? I said, no, sir. I mean, I have an idea. I said, oh, I read something here. I said, let me tell you something. He said, when you put everybody together, I think the number he gave was 300,000. Said on the Nigerian side, on the Igbo side, everyone that died was about 300,000. I was like, But this book said it was King Commillion. I said it was a lie. Because he was there, he was one of the fighters, he was the soldier. Now, there are books that I went to read later that say about 300,000. But some will say 1.5 million. Some even say 2 million people. A lot of people died. Some have said 0.5 million people. Yes. And like I said, listen, it doesn't, again, because it's important to repeat these things. Because I don't want people to think that nobody should be dying. Okay, one person dying is one. I like to say it a lot, and I'm not saying to say, oh, I'm not sorry. I say because on a normal day, if you also have that milk of kindness, you should also. There's nothing to gloat over. Say, no, nobody should die in such situations. It's terrible. Like it's nothing to be happy about. But it's a war. Okay, it's terrible. And what I was going to say earlier, for those who are just joining us, I hope YouTube is back. What I was going to say is that I don't think people even talk about these numbers as a way to discuss what happened. It's just to weaponize empathy. And it's a shame. It's a shame. You shouldn't be weaponizing empathy, especially when you know that people are actually predisposed to supporting you, supporting your cause. You shouldn't then take advantage of them and begin to use their empathy against them. I think that's wrong. All right, where were we? All right. So where were we? We're talking about the numbers. We had talked about the statement that John de St. John made about Ojukwu, that he played an irresponsible numbers game by hyping the number of the dead and giving 4 different figures at 4 different occasions. And it's not right for us to be blackmailed by saying, oh, people died. Of course, people died. Feel bad about it and, empathize. But don't be a victim of blackmail. Number 9, so we have talked about the people that were killed, people that were raped, sad stuff. Number 9, 2 million children now intellectually permanently retarded. Many of them, their children are always disturbing me on social media. Their parents are the ones that the Igbo elder said 2 million of them back in 1970 were intellectually permanently retarded. They're the ones that always disturb me every day and curse me out. I forgive you because you don't know what you are doing. 2 million Igbos who were psychologically traumatized. 2 million refugees and additional liabilities not based on human beings. Now listen to the big one. Total financial claims based on the above. 8 trillion 680 million. No, 8 trillion 680 billion 150 million naira. Egbolon Toby. So during the Oputa panel, they said that Nigeria should pay 8 trillion 680 billion 150 million naira as security reparations. What that young girl is saying, talking about Holocaust and reparations, their father said it during the Oputa panel. But that was then. So what's the latest? I thought you would not ask. Let me tell you the latest. You'll find this in the Guardian, Nigeria. This article, this article was published on the 23rd of February 2025. So that was last year. Here's the caption. 1966 school, one is the 6th apology. 10 trillion naira compensation from Tinubu. 10 trillion. Where are we going to get that? One is the 6th apology. 10 trillion naira compensation from Tinubu. Following the revelation by former military President General Ibrahim Babangida during the launch of his book, A Journey in Service, that in 1966 was not, and the Apex Sociocultural Group not know how to read. He actually called it, he said, took on an unmistakably ethnic coloration. That's what IBB said. It's in the book, A Journey in Service. This one I just lambai everybody. I'm laughing because there's some things that you see, they're so ridiculous. They're so ridiculous, you're wondering, how did we get here? But yeah. The group noted, so it says here, following the revelation by former military General President General Ibrahim Babangida during the launch of his book, A Journey in Service, that the 62 school was not an Igbo school, it was. And he even mentioned that it took on an unmistakably ethnic coloration. It's in that book. Anyway, but they said that the Igbo Apex Group, Ohaneze Ndibo, on Sunday demanded an apology from who? And 10 trillion naira as compensation from President Bola Tinubu to the Igbo. In a statement obtained by the Guardian in Abakaliki, the Deputy National President of the Ohaneze faction, Okechukwu Isiguzoro, noted that the apology and compensation had become necessary due to the staggering loss of life, with approximately 3 million Igbo. Number has gone up again. 3 million Igbo, predominantly innocent women and children, slaughtered during the conflict. An event that continues to reverberate through the collective consciousness of the Igbo people. Okay. 10 trillion naira. Thank you. Adekom, it says 2025 budget was 22 trillion naira. We should give 10 trillion naira to the Igbos. I have a question. How much are the Igbo people going to pay folks in Rivers? The people who were killed and whose bodies were dumped in oil wells in the Rivers area around Port Harcourt, how much are they going to pay for those? How much are they going to pay for the 400 people that were put in a church in the Calabar area and were burnt by the Biafran forces? How much are they going to pay for that? How much are they going to pay for people that were murdered in their homes? For those that Biafran forces unalived on the waterways in Bayelsa, how much are they going to pay in terms of reparations? Because the story is not one-sided. But for time, I would have read to you the experiences of people in Calabar and what BJ Mkeme, who was a doctor, what he said about what they went through in the hands of Biafran soldiers. Whether it was in Asang, in Enion Division, or in Atanonoyo, or in Ikorekpayong, or in Ikoroport, or in Idro. In Ikoroport, for instance, they filled two wells with bodies of men, women, and children thrown there by Igbo soldiers to die. In Asang, they killed people, and then they said that there was a woman who was bedridden for 2 years. They carried that one along, brought them in a canoe. Somebody who gave birth to a child, the soldiers bundled her out of the canoe because she just gave birth to a baby and she was groaning in her travel. The soldiers bundled her out of the canoe, which was taking them away, shot both mother and the innocent child, only a few minutes old. What's the reparations the Igbos will pay the whole town that was burnt down together with all the people the Igbo soldiers could lay their hands on, where they even severed the hand of a 10-year-old girl and killed her parents? What would they do with the 300 men, women, and children who were massacred in and around the church after the Igbo soldiers surrounded the church and set it on fire, burning down the villagers and shooting those who tried to escape? Who's going to pay reparations to those people? Who will pay reparations to people in Idro, a village of 4 miles from this writer's village, where men folk were forced to dig 3 large pits, each 7 feet deep? All the men and women were tied hand and foot and thrown into them. Children were dumped in with their parents. 5 men were left to cover each pit with earth. When the task was done, the men were themselves all shot dead and their bodies placed on the mounds. And the writer saw these bodies and the mounds himself when he arrived 3 days after the gruesome and inhuman incident. Who is going to pay reparations to 200 Ibibio men and women who had been under detention in Umaya and were taken to face a mob and they were then brutally murdered in cold blood outside the Progress Hotel? Who is paying the reparations to those people? If you read Sunset in Biafra, you see atrocities like you've never even imagined. It was written by Elechi Amadi. If you read Ojuku's Rebellion and Word Opinion by Nebo Graham Douglas, you will see things you wonder, how could a person think of doing this kind of thing to people? Even prayer houses were not spared. Say some people were praying for Nigeria when they scattered their church, killed people. Who is going to pay reparations to those people? There's no time, or we have run out of time. But I'll give you a gift. If you have not gotten the gift yet, I've been giving it to people for a while. Please go to Radio Me Global on Telegram. Go to the learning material section and look for the document Ojuku's Rebellion and World Opinion. It's a small pamphlet, but it's packed with information. It was published in 1968 during the war. Please read that document. and answer the question if you can. Who will pay reparations to all those people that Igbo soldiers killed? Who will pay reparations even to the people who were made to eat the meat of the flesh of their people in Port Harcourt? Because once you talk about that war, you have to talk about everything. The thing is that a lot of people have heard about the Biafran side, which is important. And see, the story is the Igbo side, the Igbo story is legitimate, is valid, it should be said. And they have a right to tell their story, but so do other groups. And it's important that when those other groups are talking, they are also heard. So before you begin to ask for àpàdé àwọn tí bàbá ẹ̀ náà jẹ lówó bàbá ẹ̀ kú òun wá àwọn tó jẹ lówó kiri tó bá ti rìn lọ wà tó pàdé àwọn tí bàbá ẹ̀ náà jẹ lówó. So I think hopefully when people come to that point to understand that yes, terrible things happened and you can't wish those things away and say, oh, it doesn't really matter. Again, like I always say, people dying in the Southeast, they are humans. And it's important that their story is told. But the stories of people in the minority areas also important. I'm going to have another session. I think we should do it. We'll also talk about what happened in the Midwest. The lepers that Igbo soldiers went to kill at Oshioma River, who is going to pay reparations? The people that were killed in Ugeli, in Sapele, in Wari, in Benin, the Yorubas that were killed, the Benin's that were killed, the Yorubas that were killed, the Hausas that were killed in those places, who is paying reparations for those ones? We have to ask these questions. Not because we hate any group, but because you cannot be acting as if you are the sole victim of the Nigerian narrative. That's a lie. That's not going to fly. So I think it's important for me to repeat that whatever stories, I mean, if it's the truth, for the most part, it's propaganda share from the Southeast. That's the truth from Igbo people, is propaganda for the most part. But hopefully they find it true somewhere. But even their own story is, of course, valid. Their pain, their suffering, hopefully it's not something from Radio Biafra, but their real pain. People really died. People really suffered. You read some of those documents, you cry, right? It's terrible what happened to Igbo people, but it's also terrible what Igbo people did to others. Igbo people killed people like crazy. Today is not the day. When you are done talking about what happened in Asang and in Enoin Division and in Port Harcourt and in Ikoroquot and in Idro and in Bayelsa, you have to now move to Sapele, you move to Wari, you move to Eli, you move to Benin, you move to Ondo, to Ore, right? Where people that were working in our cocoa farms and in timber spaces in Ondo were working as informants for Biafran soldiers, killing our own soldiers. Yoruba people. Do you see us crying about? You find this what I just said right now. You find the book by Olusegun Obasanjo, My Command. Killing people in Benue State, in Kogi, in Lagos, bombing places even before the war. So while we understand people's pains, I think it's also important for them to calm down and understand the fact that it's not just about them. May God bless Nigeria. May God bless every part of the country. There will be no reparations for anybody. There's another part you mentioned. We'll talk about that some other time. Nobody's paying anybody any reparations. You can talk about your pain. Hopefully, like I said, find the truth before you start carrying propaganda. Because if you don't, you spend your lifetime hurting. I'm telling people, what do you mean I should move on? What do you mean? Don't move on. Don't move on. Stay there. Just carry propaganda in your head. You don't know the truth. The other part is, when it comes to reparations, nobody's paying anything to anybody. If you're a Yoruba person or you're Nigerian, understand that you owe nobody nothing apart from love and respect. Love people, respect everybody. But the idea that you're going to be paying some people reparations, who will pay reparations? All the money we gave as a nation to help rebuild the Poland, are they going to return all that money? And here's the crazy part. If you want to pay reparations now, you're going to need oil money, Abi. The same oil people that you guys killed. I don't want to read what happened in Rivers. I've mentioned those books. Sunset in Biafra by Lechi Amadi, Ojuku's Rebellion and World Opinion by Neville Graham Douglas. Read those books. You see how people were killed and told that it was Nigerian soldiers that they killed. Meanwhile, they were villagers that the Igbo soldiers went to kill and dumped their bodies in oil wells, and those bodies that started swelling. Created concentration camps, moved people from Port Harcourt into Umuahia. Deprive people of rights in their lands, and then to matters worse, some of the people that were killed were also served on platters in restaurants. They called the meat wind the war meat. It was human flesh. Now then they produce oil pastor. And the money will pay you reparations. Are we okay? Like, are you okay? Like, so the person who not take money from that oil to come and pay you. I've not talked about what they did to your people. That's another day's talk. They showed our soldiers, especially the POWs, they showed those ones where it was the total opposite of what Yoruba soldiers and Nigerian army did to Igbo soldiers that were captured. They captured over 400 at the time. 400. They could have killed them. If they had done to them what Ojuku's men did to Yoruba soldiers and Nigerian soldiers that were caught, they would have called it war crimes. They will see what they did to us. I'll just tell you this story very quickly. 400 men were caught. At the point, they had to make a decision. What do we do? They had three options. Number one, we could fly them back to Lagos. But that would not work because they used to have flights once every week that brought food. So it was not practical. You'll find this account, for instance, in the book by Gordon Alabi Sama, Tragedy of Victory. If you fly them back, how are you going to do that? 400 people, and you only have a plane that comes once a week. He told them that we're not going to use any of those three options. We're going to get them to join the Nigerian army. And he got the 400 people together, told them, listen, you guys are Nigerians, Ojuku has lied to you. This is what is really happening. This is how you can get, into this, whatever. I was able to convince them. Out of 400, only 20 of them returned. And the reason was that they had aged parents. They had elderly people. They wanted to go back and take care of them. 20 out of 400. The 380 joined the Nigerian army. The other side of the Kini, they didn't even feed the Nigerian POWs they caught. Who paid the reparations for those ones? To be clear, this is not hate towards anybody. As a matter of fact, I think it's actually, I know that's actually labor of love. I love Igbo people just like I love any other person. And I love you enough to want you to heal. I'm not saying you should move on. You should remember, so you don't do it again. Don't forget the past, though. Don't forget, though. Because you have to learn the lessons. Even me, that I'm Nigerian, that I did not fight against the country, I still have to remember. So we don't repeat some mistakes. So no, I'm not saying you should not move on or whatever. If you like, don't move on, whatever. But the point is, I want you to heal, but you cannot heal without the truth. And I hope I've been able to present it in such a way that I'm not too harsh. But the truth of the matter is that when you hear some of these things, just propaganda, nonsense. But we need to heal if we want Nigeria to move. But if you don't want to heal, that's okay. You have a right to not want to heal. But I have a right to make sure that whatever disease you are carrying all over the place doesn't get to me, or to Yoruba people, or to the other Nigerians. We don't have to contract that disease. You can carry it around and not heal. That's okay. You have a right. But we also have a right to make sure that we contain you. We quarantine you in a particular place. You're not going to bring it to this place. Spreading propaganda, spreading victimhood, trying to steal people's resources, asking for reparations, that's not going to work. So no, don't heal. If you don't want to heal, that's okay. But we will not allow propaganda to thrive. And that's not hate. That's just love for the truth. May God bless you. May God bless every part of Nigeria. The Igbos, the Hausas, the Tiv, the Doma, the Yoruba, the Efik, everybody, every ethnicity in Nigeria. May God bless all of us. I'm in Nigeria working our time. And the people who are hurt, may they heal. And everybody has a role to play. And nobody's blaming anybody for anything. But if you want to blackmail anybody, stay in your family house. No Yoruba person or any Nigeria is being blackmailed by any sub story anymore. May God bless you. Thank you very much for listening. Now we have to go. All right. Thank you very much for listening to that. I hope you had a great time. So we've been listening to When Nigeria Refuses to Be Blackmailed, the multi-million-pound post-war receipts. And this is actually in response to a video that we played where somebody was asking for reparations and, essentially talking about almost sounding as though Nigeria owed a particular part of the country. While that stuff was going on, there's some people writing things, on Twitter saying, oh, you're opening wounds. Here's the truth. I don't think people have even healed, let alone reopen wounds. And this conversation, of course, is also on the heels of the book that the former head of state recently published. That's General Gowon, his book titled My Life of Duty and Allegiance, and it has actually sparked a lot of conversations. I'm going to be talking about this for a bit. Next week, we'll actually delve into that book, so we're able to understand some of the things he has in mind. I've been trying to compare it with his biography that was published in 1986. The book is titled Go On, the Biography of a Soldier Statesman. The content isn't too different from what you have here. This is just a bit more him. Of course, it's autobiography, so he's able to express himself a bit deeper, but it's essentially the same. The same thing for the most part, at least the ones I've read. But of course, many things have happened since 86. So essentially, you have 40 more years of, experience that he now has to document. So, and it's also important to say that because people say things like, oh, he waited so long. To be honest, a book was published in 1986, his biography, and was very involved in that, was deeply involved. And what we have right now is just another 40 years plus some of the things that we also have in that biography. And so this book has opened up the space to have conversations about the past, and certain people are not comfortable with it. The truth of the matter is that you can't gaslight the rest of the country because you think a certain way. We're going to have to lay everything open all the books, right? Lay everything on the table. You sift through everything. And I've always said that if you want to really understand Nigeria's history, particularly things that have to do with the coup and the civil war, you have to read from different sources so that you're able to have informed opinions, and you're not pandering to anyone, not even the Nigerian side, right? You want to be able to acknowledge what happened here, what happened there. It just so happens that by the time you read everything, most likely you may want to support Nigeria's narrative. I think you will support Nigeria's narrative for the most part, because when Gowon was in charge, his goal was not to demean, the Igbos or to try to push them out. He was very magnanimous, and even the narratives at the time, here's the funny thing. What if I told you that up until 1968, Nigeria was not even really concerned about talking about what was happening back at home? Meanwhile, Igbos had dominated the entire propaganda machinery, particularly in Europe and America. It was in 68 that they were like, wait, though, we may be doing the right thing, but we're losing the narrative. And you see, the war was fought on several fronts. There is the physical one where everybody's carrying guns and shooting themselves. But there's a narrative war, the war of narrative, especially in the international community, And I think that the success of that thing from the Biafra perspective, or Biafra side, has actually lived longer. It has outlived the propagandists themselves. And that's a good thing in the sense that you want your work to go beyond you, right? Like to last. Excuse me. You want your work to last, right? But here's the bad thing. Because much of what has lasted turns out to be propaganda, it's very difficult for people to sift through and actually find the truth. But we can't find the truth because there are many documents that have been written about this. And I'm also working on something. It's just that it's taking a while. And it's okay, it should take a while if you really want to do it right. All of that to say that, as we have these conversations, it's not about hating on ethnicity. I see a lot of people, they can't really get into the conversation, they can't really engage. They go on social media and just type, oh, you hate. It's just a retarded phrase. Like you repeat it as though you know what you're talking about. Nobody hates anybody. But you can't, dominate, or what's the word now? You can't force everybody to hold on to a single narrative. And like I said at the beginning of today's session, everywhere in the world, it is the victor that determines the story. In Nigeria, it's the victim. And everybody that doesn't pander to the narrative of the victim is a bigot and a tribalist. Absolute nonsense. I am not saying the victor should determine the narrative, but I'm saying that the victim narrative cannot be the one that we're living by. We've got to be able to see things from all sides, not even just both sides. You look at the Nigerian side, all right? You look at the Igbo side, the Biafran side. To be honest, Biafra was actually an Igbo project for the most part. Most of the other ethnicities, they suffered like anything. And don't let anybody, bamboozle you with, after all, the second in command was Philip Effiong and it was from Akwa Ibom. That doesn't mean that Akwa Ibom people were not killed by Igbo forces. And if you think I'm lying, I just shared a page on my Twitter page. Somebody was saying nonsense. So I had to just, take a picture of a page in Crisis and Conflicts, and I posted it on Twitter. If you follow me on Twitter, you see Busuyo's works on Twitter of the atrocities committed in individuals in different parts of Akwa Ibom, River State. A lot of people were wasted in those places, right? All of that to say that the idea that it was a regional killing is a lie. It was largely an Igbo thing. But even then, you still have to read the Igbo perspective, okay? In order to be objective, you read the Igbo side, you read the Nigerian side, read the side of the Midwest. They have a different narrative about this matter. You read the Eastern minorities angle. You have to read what the Eastern minorities in present-day Cross River, Akwa Ibom, Rivers, and Bayelsa, what happened to them. You have to read the Northern side. What happened that led to everything? It's not just that people woke up one day and started killing people. Killing people is terrible, right? Regardless of who is doing it. However, you also want to understand what's the cause. Why do you want to know the cause? It's not because you're trying to reduce the idea of our people that want to make it not have any vim. That's not the point. You're not trying to neutralize the effect it has on people. You're trying to understand the root cause so I don't repeat the mistakes. And I can assure you, folks from the South, is because they've been raised on propaganda, they have not learned anything from the things that led to the war, which is why they're literally, and I'm not even joking about, they just study it, literally repeating the exact same mistakes. Just going everywhere, constituting nuisance. Now, to make matters worse, there's not social media. So it's a bit more glaring. And I'm praying to God that these things will not lead to another kind of, terrible event in the country, because people get tired after a while. There's only so much people can take. All of that to say that you read the Igbo angle, you read the Nigerian angle, you read the Eastern minorities angle, you read the Midwest angle, you read the Yoruba angle, because we also have a story. When you are done with all that angle, you read the Northern angle, right? Even the things that happened just before the war, how Ojukwu was bombing places in Benue, how when he invaded the Midwest, he went all the way to Okene in Kogi State. Then you read the British angle. There are a number of books. You read the American side. Now, by the time you put everything together, something begins. You see that, of course, Nigeria was not a saint in this whole thing. Nigeria forces didn't do anything wrong. Of course, it did a lot of rubbish, particularly Asaba massacre. You can tell where Nigeria messed up, right? But here's the crazy part. If I mention the things that Nigeria does wrong, these clowns will be telling you are doing a good job. As soon as you mention one thing that the Lord and Savior did wrong, you're a bigot. That's why I don't take them seriously. They're just a bunch of clowns, just disturbing me on social media, sending threads. You can't do me anything. You just die for nothing. You try to do it, it will happen to you. I will even have to lift my finger. Or talk about because I receive threats every day. And I'm wondering, these people say they go to school, you don't even have the capacity to actually engage in an intellectual conversation. The next thing you're saying that something's going to happen, the thing will happen to you and your own people. The idea basically is that all of us have to stick to the narrative of the victim. It does not happen anywhere in the world. Àwọn tó bá jagun ẹni tó bá ṣẹ́gun ló máa ń sọ pé báyìí ló ṣe rí, kì í ṣe ẹni tán náà bí bàrà ló máa sọ fún gbogbo èèyàn pé báyìí nìkan ṣe máa ronú. Pàápàá tó bá pẹ́ tó yẹ pé òun gan ò ní ronú. I had to say this in Yoruba because to say it in English should have been, tedious. I was saying that everywhere in the world, the victor determines the story. You can't allow people who were victims, who were conquered, to be the one telling you exactly how to think in Nigeria, especially when those people don't even have a culture that actually puts them at that place to determine anything in the country. And it's a fact. If not for Nigeria, how did we even meet? You have no understanding of political structures. You have no understanding of complex systems. And you're the one that will tell us how to think. And if we say no, it's because we are bigots. No. And if you call me a bigot for that, that makes you a maggot. Absolute nonsense. So yeah, Nigeria will work in our lifetime, by the grace of God. And if you ask me, what's my greatest goal because I want to say, what do you really want to get? I want you guys to heal. But that's the second goal, to be honest. My primary goal is to ensure that everybody in Nigeria actually understands what really happened, so that number one, will not be blackmailed by people and manipulated using, emotions and weaponizing our empathy. Number two, we will not repeat the mistakes. E.g., no victor, no vanquished is a terrible mistake. Don't see, sometimes kindness to the wicked in his mind is weakness. Kindness is weakness to the wicked. You should still be kind though. But you have to be kind with tact. Be kind because that's your nature, but you've got to be tactful, or else they'll assume you are weak and just be going around moving like mad people everywhere, like Nnamdi Kanu used to say. I'll just read some comments here before we go. The video was very long, so we may not be able to have a lot of responses, but we'll be here again on Monday at 7. On Monday at 4 p.m. if you're time West African time. If you join us for the first time, we have these sessions every weekday, Mondays to Fridays, 4 p.m. if you're time West African time. So I'm just going to quickly read some of the comments here before we go. Let's start with Facebook and YouTube. So Adia De Go on Facebook says, I was in Nsukka after its liberation. I can't call you Adia De Go now. I have to call you Mr. Adia De Go. You were in Nsukka. That was in 1970. Nsukka was liberated 1967, man. Abi. Ha. Balagwa wa mbio. Dear Lord, thank you, sir, for your presence. I'm actually honored. I know a number of people are actually here who are in their 60s and 70s. They are 50-year-olds, but no, but 60s, 70s, 80s. I've noticed 1 or 2 80-year-olds. It's humbling. Thank you very much for sharing this with us. So let me read what you wrote. Mr. Adia De Go says, I was in Nsukka after its liberation, feeding our fellow Nigerians impacted by the war, and we eat the same food we gave them as members of Nigerian Red Cross. May God forgive this present generation of Igbos for their falsehood. Wow. Just wow. You're not even a child after the war, but during the war, you were one of the Red Cross. Wonderful. Thank you very much for that submission. It's humbling. I'm trying to digest it because it's heavy. All right. Your Might on YouTube says, Gowon could have said that the Biafra was a regrettable, but the secessionists had been crushed and defeated. I think he meant that Gowon could have said that the Biafra war was regrettable, but the secessionists had been crushed and defeated. This should serve as a warning to anyone who wants to destabilize Nigeria. Let us rebuild. Oh yeah, that's a better thing than no victor, no vanquished. Interestingly, while I was talking, one clown on Facebook was telling me it was Louis Banefo that came up with the phrase "no victor, no vanquished." The conversation is not about who came up with the phrase. The idea basically is that whose policy was it, and it was the policy of the Gowon government. Any sane person can understand that. Some people just try to be funny. But yeah, we shouldn't have had no victor, no vanquished. We should have said, listen, this is what happened. We crushed this. Nobody should do it again. Let's just thank God that we had Gowon. If not, and I've said it several times, I'll repeat it again. If the man who actually carried out the July 1966 coup, if he was the one who was leading Nigeria, there is no way on earth that there will be a civil war in this country. And that's not it's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's neither good nor bad. The person who spearheaded the July coup, I mean, one of the major planners of that coup was Murtala Mohammed. Gowon was not even part of the planners. He knew they were going to do it, but he wasn't one of the people that were designing the whole thing. If you're looking for people who actually were in the room, looking at Murtala Mohammed, T.Y. Danjuma, and folks like that, Gowon was not really part of it. It was not even really. He wasn't part of it, although he knew. But here's the thing. Because he was the most senior Northern officer and other Northern officers could, acquiesce to him, they decided to make him the head of state, contrary to what Ojukwu was saying that should have been. Babafemi Ogundipe. Ogundipe was a Yoruba man. He was not part of the coup. He didn't plan it with them, and they didn't want to trust any Southerner, considering what happened to them in January. You also have to understand where the Northerners were coming from. I'm not saying it's right, but you have to understand their own mindset as well. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is this. If Murtala Mohammed had turned out to be the head of state on the 29th July 66, he would have dealt with Ojukwu immediately. And when I say dealt, he would have done anything possible. And that's why I think people don't really respect Gowon, because they've never really thought of the alternative. And I'm not saying the alternative is bad. I'm just saying that he's more decisive. He's not as gentle. But let everybody keep saying what they want to say. But yeah, you're right. You're right with that comment on YouTube. Thank you very much. White Kubo on YouTube says Gowon is supposed to be the Igbo's greatest national hero because he saved them from annihilation. That's true. Brimo Sherson on YouTube says, well, English will always be what they are. I am not surprised. Mr. Tajuddin on Facebook says, so the Igbos lied each time they made themselves look like victims and the rest of Nigeria aggressors. So here's the thing. There were times when Nigerians were aggressors, but there were times where they were aggressors. And I think that's what the war really is. But you see, if you want to drive the narrative of a genocide, you're going to make it look as if your hands were tied, you were sitting in one lungu, and people came and beat you there. You make sure you don't tell anybody what you did, which is actually a shame. Because what that does is that the generation of... It's not so much about the people that are lying, and here's the thing. It's not so much about the people that came up with the propaganda. It's about the young ones today who think their parents were just lying dogs, that Nigeria just decided to beat wherever they were. They didn't do anything. So the kids don't understand the idea of responsibility. You have conversations, even in Nigerian politics today, you don't see anything. But once you get to the word responsibility, accountability, it's as if you are getting to, a space where everything you see there is kryptonite. Like they can't, it's like the end of the whatever. Let's just say end of the discussion, because people didn't really say, this is what we did. In every issue, you hear people say things like, this is what we did, and all of those things, and then this is how it happened. But in this particular one, they did nothing to anybody. Everybody just hates them because they are Chris. Everybody hates Chris. Sunday Ogunbenle on YouTube says, Igbos will never cease from blaming their misfortune on other people, especially the Yorubas, forgetting the protection offered them by these same people during and after the Civil War. Thank you, sir. Babs Alaba on Facebook says, that's what happens in war. That's what happens in wars. People die. It is regrettable because the war could have been avoided, but the ego of Ojukwu and his senseless Nzogbu chanting chimps pushed him too far. Must we pity the Igbos because their people died during the war? I will say yes. And that's because Nigerians too died in that war. Else there would be no Armed Forces Remembrance Day. Most guilt trip other Nigerians? No. Who is guilt tripping the Igbos for killing the other people during the 1966 coup? No one. In fact, they can never be accountable for that, and so let them get lost. Well, thank you for your submission. I think it's only fair to see, whenever I read Igbo books and I see they paint those scenarios and stuff, it touches you. And I think it's a natural reaction, and it's the right way. By the way, let me say this, and I say it often, I think it's important. If you're studying anything Igbo and you get to that particular part of history, if something doesn't make you feel anyhow, you may want to check and maybe do whatever you do whatever your religion is, just to get your heart right with God. And I'm saying this because people can push you to the point where you don't even care if they suffered, and that's a bad place to be. So when you hear their pain, the story of their pain and stuff, naturally you should also feel like, it shouldn't have happened to human beings. You should feel, that kind of sympathy and even empathy, for them. I think it's a natural. It should be a natural response. So that way, we're not having conversation from a place of hate. However, while I can feel empathy or feel sympathy, while I can feel sympathy or even be empathetic towards a particular people, I cannot take the responsibility for what happened to them. And that's where the issue is. I cannot apologize for it because it's not my fault. I cannot take responsibility for it because it was not my responsibility. I cannot change my story because of it. I cannot pander to people because of their experience. Because I also have my own experience as a Yoruba man. And Yoruba people also went through things. Our people also died during the war. I don't see anybody crying for us. So show empathy. Make sure your heart is right as a person. But don't allow yourself to be blackmailed. And I think it's really difficult. People think it's either this or that. In other words, if I'm showing empathy, I must be blackmailed. If I don't want to be blackmailed, I cannot show empathy. I don't think that's how it is. As we grow up, and God will help all of us, as we grow, we learn to compartmentalize, right? You can be different things depending on the situation, right? And the fact that I'm talking like this doesn't mean that if I'm watching anything that has to do with all those, even though I know that Ojukwu was trying to engineer the world, which is a fact, by the way. If you read Robert Goldstein's letter of August 1968, Ojukwu was engineering the whole world. He had the guts, and he succeeded to a large extent. And what he did was to use papers like New York Times, like Life, to push, images of Kwashoko reading. Despite the fact that I know that it was propaganda, it still touches me so every time I see it, because it could be propaganda for him. It was real for the children and for their families. So that heart of love and of kindness and that compassion, it has to be there. And if you are losing it, please find a way to do whatever you do in your spiritual space. Whether you pray or you meditate or whatever, get it back so that you don't thrive on hate. And the reason I say that is because, see, why I don't like hate narratives, which is why it irks me when these clowns come around and shout, "You hate us, you hate us." The reason I cannot hate people is this: hate is a very powerful energy. And energy, you can't kill energy, unless you repurpose it. If we build stuff on hating another person, once you are done with that group, you begin to hate yourself. You look for another person amongst you and you begin to hate, because that hate must be expressed. That's why I don't even allow hate at all. However, conversation that has to do with Nigeria is my love for country and my love for Yoruba nation, with or without sovereignty, right? My love for my people, my love for Nigeria will make me go deep into history. It's not because I hate one group. If I'm talking Yoruba, when I was talking about what Yoruba people did, nobody came here to say I hated Yoruba people. So all this nonsense should stop. All I'm saying basically is just that, you should be empathetic towards people, but you should also learn, to shield your heart from, these manipulators and gaslighters. There's a clown in the comment section. Don't worry. If the moderator is not here, normally they should have blocked you or muted you because you're a retard. Yeah, one of those people that they were talking about in that book. I won't go back to the book, Sha, because you're wasting my time. As I'm looking at one clown on YouTube, I'm not your bro. It's your dad that can call me bro, King Ibeju. Me and your father are the ones that can be talking bro. I can't be your bro. Mm-hmm. Hello. Sorry about that. I think it's the app, but I'm back. So I was reading the last comments from your might. Thank you very much, Lola and Koboko. Your might says the Igbo kids creating oh, Shelley. Shine me. Wow. 1 second, please. Sorry, is it clear? Because I can't seem to know what's going on with my device. Okay, you can hear me. All right, great. Okay. All right, thank you. I think I had a little issue. Yeah, so I was saying, I was reading the comments on YouTube. Thank you very much, Madam Lola and Koboko, for alerting me. Thanks a lot. And Mr. Adewan as well. So Yomite says the Igbo kids creating falsehood narratives online are doing that because of what their fathers had fed them as victims. I hope they could be liberated from the shackles that kept them bound. I really do hope so as well. That's the thing. I really do hope so. And I don't think people really understand it, that you could do this because you love people. Maybe people think that if you love a person, you just be docile and just allow them to say anything and just say yes, just lap it up because of love. That's nonsense. There's something called tough love. If you ask me, I think, and here's the truth, and this is my heart to be honest, I think that if everybody in Nigeria studies everything from every perspective, like I said earlier, you don't discount anybody's experience, including the Igbos and the Midwest. If you listen to everybody, you will be able to grow as a person. You'll be able to empathize and grow as a person. And then you can now find healing if you are hurting. But as long as some people find a pedestal to perch on, that's Yoruba way of saying that a house built with saliva will be destroyed by the dew. Okay? If you find yourself on one saliva built pedestal and say, oh, we did nothing, everybody is the devil, they did this to us, you will never heal. You can take 1,000 years, you will never heal. You can go to church and speak in tongues, you will never heal. You can tell people you are looking for reparations, you will never heal. Generation after generation, you will always be victims. That will become your family legacy and your ethnic heritage. Don't repeat the mistakes, and at least you get out of that problem. But if you think everything you're going through in life is the fault of every other person but yourself, it will be very difficult for you to make progress in life as an individual. It's not even it's not just an ethnic issue, it's also an individual issue. If I'm having a problem with my career, whatever it is, right, in family, in relationships, maybe there's something I've contributed to it, right? It doesn't mean I'm the one responsible for everything. I may not be, and I may be. But you have to be willing to look in the mirror and not just outsource responsibility every time. If you do that, you can't really grow as a human being. Well, you can, find a way to gaslight people that, you win in some ways, but in reality, you are losing. It's just that it's very sad when it's happening at a very large level, at a large scale, when an entire ethnicity is operating that way, like an ethnicity of narcissists and gaslighters, manipulators, and blackmailers who have been born and bred in the labyrinth of propaganda. I didn't mention anybody. I'm just telling you what can happen. May God save all of us, and may people find healing. Healing is the most important thing, to be honest. Healing, and we healed. One of these days, I'm going to do a show where we'll talk about what happened to Yoruba people. I won't say Yoruba people. I'll just say other people. I don't like singling out Yoruba people because it's going to make you look as if no. Let's see. Well, that's why I'm going to paint it though, because I don't like painting Yoruba as victims. But we have also suffered in this country, But we don't go around talking about it because people have different ways of processing stuff. All right, thank you very much for being part of today's session. We have some irritants in the comment section. One of them is actually, it can bear with him, is, at least he tries to come around and we have conversations. The other one is a perfect retard. that one is, I think, is just a failure of his parents. But we'll see what we can do to help your destiny as long as you come here. I didn't mention him, but I'm sure you know yourself. Okay, he's one of the clowns. Throw in the comment section. And please keep writing nonsense until I'm able to actually mention your name and send you back home to those who didn't raise you properly. And I will do that if you continue. I'm sure you know you're the one I'm talking about, Abby. So try and use your brain. God bless you. All right, let's have the anthem. So we're gonna close the session for today. I've read the comments. YouTube, is a bit àwọn ìgbèrè kan tí wá bí sọ́wọ́n ti fún wọn lọ́rọ̀ tó ti pọ̀ sọmọ yẹ kí n máa ka àwọn yẹn jáde, but thank you, your mighty Mr. Brimo, and thank you, Mr. Labi on Facebook, for that response to SMK. I just want to read that one because you went for the jugular. All right, let's have the anthem. So again, thank you very much for being here. We usually have this session. We do have these sessions every weekday, Mondays to Fridays, 4 p.m. Ife time, West African time. We discuss history, culture, politics, and innovation. And when we discuss history, sometimes it's not very palatable, but yeah, it comes with people who have sense. We learn. It might be a bit, bitter, but it's for our good. Thank you very much for being part of today's session. Before we go, we're going to listen to the anthems, the Nigerian anthem and the Yoruba anthem, and then we will call it a day. Please take a listen to our anthem. There's a joke in the comment section, and I don't want to be part. There's a conversation, not a joke. There's a conversation in the comment section I don't want to be a part of, because if I get in there, this bunch of clowns will not like my response. So, boy, it is well. Let's just Here's Nigerian national anthem. Please sing along if you know. If not, please learn the lyrics. Enjoy. Enjoy.
Nigeria, we hail thee, our own dear native land, though tribe and tongue may differ, in brotherhood we stand. Nigerians all are proud to serve the land. Our flag shall be a symbol that truth and justice reign. In peace or battle,
àwa ni ìmọ́lẹ̀ ògo adúláwọ̀, ìmọ́lẹ̀ wo ni wọ́kùn lágbára Ọlọ́run. Ẹ̀yìnbó ní bàjẹ́, Nàìjíríà náà ní bàjẹ́, ilé wa ọ̀nà wa ò ní bàjẹ́. Thank you very much for being part of today's session, and thanks for hanging out throughout the week. It's been wonderful having these conversations with you. We'll be here again on Monday at 4 p.m. Ife time, West African time. That'll be a new month, and our form for 2 should be ready. Tribes of Odudua and to Nigeria transformation, ode and opportunities. The form will be available by next week, and hopefully we'll be able to get started on practical things that we can do to make our enclave better and our country better. Thanks for being part of today's session. Do have a lovely, lovely weekend. And sorry, I'm seeing things in the comment section. I want to hold on for a second. I want to play the devil's advocate. I just want to see if anybody's going to respond to that. If they don't respond in 2 seconds, then in a couple of seconds, then I will maybe just end the live. So I see some people just moving mad in the comment section. Somebody has finally said, I hope Nigeria can actualize Igbo exiting in our generation as way forward. If you're an Igbo person and you say the person is wrong, then and you're also supporting Biafra, then that means there's something wrong with you. I mean, whatever happens. Whatever people want to have, hopefully they get it. They want to leave Nigeria. I hope that works out. And it is well. Everybody be all right, last. Thanks everybody for being part of today's session. I'll see you again on Monday. Have a lovely weekend. God bless you. Odaro.